Two men are fishing in the waters of the Ruzizi River in Burundi, a small nation that lies between Tanzania and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The sun is hanging low in the sky, and the men are keeping a wary eye out for hippopotamuses. Nighttime is when the hippos leave the water to feed so the sun doesn't scorch their sensitive skin. And of all the animals in Africa, they are the most feared. As the sun sets above them, the men haul in catfish after catfish. Dusk is always the best time to fish, but the commotion has drawn the attention of something large and cold-blooded. Something with hunting instincts honed by millions of years of evolution. An ancient predator that once preyed on dinosaurs and then outlived them. Distracted as the men are by their great success, they don't notice the brief shadows of a large dark mass moving through the murky waters. One of the men leans down to pick up a large catfish, still struggling on the end of the hook, when suddenly the water erupts with 2 tons of reptilian fury, giant jaws seizing the fisherman by his midsection and dragging him under. With one flick of its mighty tail, the gigantic crocodile has already pushed itself deep into the waters of the Ruzizi River, and the only sign of the horrific attack are rapidly diminishing ripples. Just days later, a mother and her children are doing laundry by the river's edge. This time in broad daylight, her teenage son is helping and busily scrubbing away when suddenly there's an explosion of water as a giant crocodile lunges out of the river and seizes the boy by his leg. With barely enough time to scream, the boy is dragged into the water and drowned, though later his dismembered remains would be found and identified by local farmers. These are just 2 of over 300 alleged attacks against humans by the legendary African crocodile Gustave. A beast of a crocodile, Gustave has never been captured, but has been observed by scientists at a distance. The monster is estimated to be anywhere between 18 to 25 feet long and weigh more than 2 tons. Previously, it was thought that Gustave had to be around 100 years old in order to have reached such incredible size, but observation of the crocodile when he opened his mouth revealed that Gustave still had all of his teeth, and crocodiles of that age are nearly toothless. Unlike most other animals, crocodiles never truly stop growing, and their sizes are only limited by their lifespan. If a crocodile can avoid predation, disease, or starvation, it can continue to grow indefinitely, and it's thought that a crocodile's true lifespan is unknown and only limited by their ability to continue hunting. Once the teeth are lost, though, the crocodile is no longer able to hunt and thus dies of starvation. If a crocodile's teeth could keep on growing forever, though, it's thought that crocodiles may have a lifespan as great as 150 years, or possibly even more, which would make them some of the longest-lived reptiles in the world. Another factor working against giant crocodiles is the necessity for larger and larger prey as they grow, a handicap that Gustave currently faces. As they get bigger, crocodiles are no longer able to hunt fast, agile prey such as fish, antelope, and zebra, which forces the animals to hunt much larger prey such as hippos, big wildebeest, and naturally, humans. With 300 deaths attributed to Gustave, it's believed that the giant killer croc has long ago made the switch to humans and found them to be easy prey, which only encourages the crocodile to hunt more humans. The first reported kills by Gustave of humans began back in the 1970s, and it's thought that Gustave is around 63 to 64 years old, meaning he must have gotten a taste for people quite early on in his life. Yet the initial attacks were blamed on other crocodiles, and it wasn't until the 80s that they started being linked to the sightings of one specific and very large croc. Still, his body count was hard to nail down, as Gustave curiously would not always eat the people he preyed on. Often bodies would be discovered dismembered and in pieces, yet not eaten. Why Gustave was killing people and not eating them was and still is a mystery, as dismembered bodies have been discovered as recently as the 2010s. Perhaps, though, the explanation can be found with another terrifying prey animal, the great white shark. Once mature, great whites hunt seals almost exclusively. Their bodies offer densely packed reserves of thick fat, which is an excellent source of energy for the sharks. Most humans, on the other hand, offer a far less satisfying treat for the shark, which is why so many shark attacks are limited to a single exploratory bite, with the animal immediately spitting the swimmer or surfer back out in disgust when it realizes its mistake. For Gustave, it might be the same case. An animal as giant as Gustave requires a very high-calorie diet, and though crocodiles can go months without eating at times, for a croc the size of Gustave, hunting can be difficult. It is kind of hard after all to ambush prey when you're the size of a small truck. The sheer bulk of the animal could be giving it away to the big hippos and wildebeests it needs in order to survive. Crocodiles do most of their hunting on the shallows close to the riverbank, where animals come to drink. And if you're the size of Gustav, there's just not many places where you can lie inconspicuously in shallow water. All that bulk also makes hunting agile prey such as antelope or fish, which make up a significant portion of a regular crocodile's diet, all but impossible. What this means is that Gustav must hunt every opportunity it has, and while other animals have long learned to fear and respect the water, we humans have yet to catch on. Perhaps it's our perceived mastery of the environment, our ability to build cities and towns, that has insulated us from the primeval instincts to fear what may lurk in the water. Whatever the reason, humans tend to be a lot less careful in the rivers and lakes that Gustav prowls than any other animal. And with our pathetically weak bodies, we hardly put up a fight. Gustav may simply be attacking out of sheer instinct, seeing prey and snapping at it the moment it has an opportunity. But after dismembering a human, he may realize what a small meal we are, and then spit out its victim. That would explain the discovery of so many mutilated bodies after a Gustav attack. Of course, for others, Gustav is a good scapegoat for their own crimes, and it's believed that many gorillas dismember their captives and dump them in the rivers, knowing the locals will be quick to blame Gustav instead of them. With little official monitoring of Burundi's wildlife, it can be hard to pin down an exact kill count for Gustav. But few doubt that the big crocodile has an appetite for humans and has killed many dozens, likely hundreds. Gustav to date has attacked women, children, and men, as well as livestock and pets. Farmers have hunted the animal and even shot at him, all with little effect. Yet despite his fearsome reputation, the government of Burundi has never called for his extermination, and instead scientists have actually tried to capture Gustav in order to move him away from people and better study him. One such capture attempt occurred in 2004, with a team of scientists being granted 2 months to attempt to capture the killer croc. Because of a rapidly deteriorating political situation, the local government was not able to ensure the safety of the scientists past this time limit, and thus the team got to work immediately on trapping Gustav. But first, they had to find the legendary croc, a feat that was not so easy in the vast African bush. With the aid of hot air balloons and motorized gliders, though, the team eventually found Gustav, and though they were unable to get close enough to properly measure him, imprints left in the mud and photos of him sunbathing indicated he may be as big as 25 feet. If true, then that would make Gustav the largest crocodile ever recorded, far larger than Lolong, the largest crocodile ever held in captivity, who came in at a whopping 20 feet 3 inches. After finding Gustav, the team set to work setting a series of cage-like traps for Gustav, baiting them with meat hanging in hooks and an infrared camera to capture images at night. Yet, despite leaving the traps out for weeks, the closest they ever got to luring the croc in was a brief video capture of a very large croc eyeing the hanging meat from the water just outside the cage. Thinking that perhaps Gustav would respond better to live prey, the scientists switched to placing live chickens inside the traps, though again the chickens were ignored. Interestingly enough, not just by Gustav but by other crocs as well. When the chickens didn't work, in a scene straight out of Jurassic Park, the scientists put live goats inside the cages, and yet still, Gustav nor any other crocodile struck. Or so they think. During one particularly violent rainstorm, one of the cages slipped into the river, and when scientists showed up the next morning, they found the goat gone. Whether it had broken free and escaped the sinking cage, or had actually been gobbled up by a giant croc and the cage failed to close is anyone's guess. Frustrated by their inability to capture Gustav, the scientists switched methodologies and instead attempted to use tried-and-true snare traps. The snares had bait, typically large chunks of meat sitting on the ground, and once an animal went for the bait, the snare was sprung and would wrap rope around the animal's body, holding it in place. Incredibly, even those failed to capture or even entice Gustav or any of the other crocs. And with time having run out, the scientists were forced to leave the country. Since then, political chaos has discouraged further official expeditions to the area, the political situation being nearly dangerous as Gustav himself. However, the legend of Gustav had spread far and wide, and in 2010 a French naturalist named Patrice Fay, living in Burundi, made new attempts to capture the legendary beast. He would shoot Gustav, but not with a gun, but rather a tranquilizer dart. Gustav is likely immune to bullets anyway, as scientists believe that his hide is so thick and his mass so large that even a large caliber rifle can't penetrate deep enough into his body to cause serious damage. A fact supported by the 4 distinct bullet scars that have been observed on Gustav's body. Faye has another plan. Shoot Gustav with a tranquilizer dart and stop his rampage by moving him to a remote area free of people or perhaps a man-made enclosure. Yet despite tracking the animal for 3 months, during which 17 attacks on people were recorded, and giving out dozens of cell phones to locals who were instructed to immediately call Faye upon sighting the monster, the quest to stop Gustav's rampage has failed. Or perhaps not. The last confirmed sighting of Gustav was in 2015, and the apparent lack of confirmed sightings since then may indicate that Gustav has at last met his end. In the end, it may simply have been the ever-growing influence humans have on the local environment that did Gustav in, with farmers expanding their fields and pushing wildlife out of the area. The big game that Gustav relied on may simply no longer be available, and unable to hunt smaller prey, Gustav may have starved to death. We may never know the giant killer croc's ultimate fate, but for thousands of Africans living along the banks of the Ruzizi River, it's best to keep a sharp eye out when near the waters and never stray too far into them. Welcome to another episode of the Infographic Show. Today we're going to take a look at the top 10 most painful animal attacks you could ever endure. At number 10 is one of the world's deadliest animals. It is 100 times more deadly than sharks. Ranging from Asia to America, the crocodile claims on average about 1,000 victims every year versus just 10 by sharks. And while it would be excruciatingly painful to be chomped on by a big great white shark, a crocodile attack is exponentially more painful because of the crocodile's unique physiology. That's because unlike sharks and most other animals, crocodiles can't really chew. Instead, they're forced to tear chunks of meat from their prey and gobble them up in entire bites. They do this by the dreaded death roll, where a crocodile latches onto prey and begins to violently roll in the water. Crocodiles have the strongest bite force in the world. Once the crocodile is latched on, absolutely nothing will pry it loose, and the twisting motion of the croc's body ends up tearing loose entire chunks of flesh. Eyewitnesses to crocodile attacks describe seeing the victims torn to pieces one roll at a time. 9. At number 9 is an Australian native whose bite is venomous but not deadly to humans. The yellow-faced whip snake is an agile and fast predator that preys primarily on frogs, small lizards, and lizard eggs. Unlike most snakes, the yellow-faced whip snake is fast enough to even catch lizards at a full run. Its bite is venomous, as the bites of most snakes are, but it is not particularly dangerous to humans. However, victims have described the pain as an intense and incredible burning sensation that creeps up the extremities. Bites can also cause extreme localized swelling, and repeated exposure to yellow-faced whipsnake venom makes each subsequent bite even more painful. 8. At number 8 is a creature whose malice isn't exactly an attack, but more of a total infestation. The Ascariasis roundworm, the parasitic worm that lives in the intestines of wild animals and about 10% of the developing world's human population. People can become infected via the ingestion of Ascariasis eggs found in feces or soil contaminated by feces. Once swallowed, the eggs hatch inside of your intestine, and the young larvae enter your bloodstream until they make their way to your lungs to continue their development. Once fully mature, the worms then leave your lungs and make their way to your throat, at which point you will either cough up or swallow the worms lodged in your throat. Those that are swallowed make their way back into your intestine, where they'll mate and lay more eggs, some of which will hatch while others will exit through your feces. It's disgusting, but that doesn't compare to the excruciating pain caused by a total infestation of Ascariasis, which can see the worms multiply to such numbers that they cause a blockage of the intestines, liver, and pancreas. These blockages can not only lead to sepsis, but also create horrific stomach cramping and pain. 7. At number 7 is a miniature terror with one of the most painful bites of all insects. The assassin bug makes its home across the bottom 2/3 of the continental United States. While most bloodsuckers inject their victims with local anesthetics so they never even realize they're being bit, the assassin bug makes its presence known with a red-hot, painful bite compared to burning coals. As if that wasn't enough, about 60% of all assassin bugs carry Chagas disease, a parasitic disease that is spread via their feces, causing heart failure and enlarged organs. Chagas disease is incurable, and if symptoms aren't managed, it is deadly. 6. At number 6 is another snake, though this time of a far deadlier variety. The infamous black mamba snake makes its home across Africa, and it has a bite so deadly it can kill an adult human being in a half hour if untreated, with a fatality rate of 100%. The black mamba's neurotoxic venom attacks the nervous system by destroying the chemicals needed to transmit signals between nerve cells. This leads to a paralyzing effect and can quickly shut down the lungs and heart. Survivors often describe feeling as if their blood was on fire, and with the pain radiating from the bite and expanding across their entire body. At number 5 is an arachnid from down under. Australia's redback spider makes its home anywhere humans live, hiding out under floorboards, bookshelves, and in flower pots. Identified by a red or orange strip on top of their abdomen, they bear a striking resemblance to the American black widow spider, but are a fraction of the size. Barely larger than a match head, the redback spider nevertheless packs one of the most painful bites of all spiders. Extremely venomous, bites from a redback spider can be lethal for small children. They cause extreme pain in the affected area, followed by a loss of coordination, nausea, vomiting, and sometimes even convulsions. Luckily, only half of the population is a danger to humans, with a male's fangs being too small to penetrate human skin. Unluckily, though, the larger females fully capable of penetrating human skin are also extremely aggressive and will not hesitate to attack anybody that strays into their webs. At number 4 is a distant relative of man's best friend. The hyena is a notorious pack killer, given a very wide berth by most Africans. While most predatory animals ensure a victim is dead before beginning to eat it in order to prevent injury to themselves by struggling prey, hyenas show no such compulsion. Observed eating crippled animals alive, hyenas don't bother making sure their prey is dead before beginning a feast. They're all too happy to settle down and start tearing pieces of flesh with their powerful jaws the moment they've overpowered an animal. Known for attacking sleeping campers in the bush, hyenas will often bite people's faces and eat the soft tissue of the nose, mouth, breasts, and groin, eventually moving to the stomach and intestines. Victims typically take minutes to die from blood loss, though one hopes shock sets in long before that. At number 3 is one of the world's most unassuming and deadliest animals. Another native of Africa, the hippopotamus is extremely aggressive and territorial, killing 500 people a year. Weighing in at 3 tons, they are also surprisingly fast animals, achieving speeds of up to 18 miles per hour. Hippos routinely attack swimmers, canoes, and even speedboats that stray too close. With their massive jaws and 6-inch long teeth, they have been known to bite people in half with just one bite. Their hyper-aggressiveness often sees them continue to maul victims long after they're dead, trampling them underfoot and even biting limbs off. In one particularly gruesome attack in 2014, a hippo upended a boat transporting a group of 12 children and 1 adult, killing all of them. At number 2 is a bottom-dwelling fish from the West Pacific. The infamous stonefish is perfectly camouflaged to look like, well, a stone, leading many hapless swimmers to accidentally step on one. The stonefish is an ambush predator, and its venom is delivered via its 13 dorsal spines and serves only as a protective measure. When a swimmer accidentally steps on one, each spine can shoot several ounces of potent venom deep into tissues of the stonefish's victim. Untreated, a stonefish sting can be fatal to an adult human within an hour. But even if treated, the pain will last far, far longer than that. Victims describe how the pain at first feels like a hot torch lit directly under your foot. The burning sensation then moves up the entire length of your body over the course of hours as the venom courses through your blood, and it's followed by a feeling like a sledgehammer pounding your limbs every 10 seconds. If that doesn't sound bad enough, there's also the fact that the pain can last for days. At number 1 is hands down the most deadly creature in the ocean. None are more feared than the Irukandji jellyfish, which ranges in size from several feet to a few inches. The initial sting reportedly feels like a little less than a mosquito bite and is typically ignored by victims. However, within 30 minutes, symptoms begin to set in, including severe headaches, back, muscle, chest, and abdominal pain, with intense cramping. Nausea, vomiting, sweating, anxiety, and hypertension quickly follow. Perhaps the most curious symptom of all is a feeling of impending doom, with victims so certain that they are facing death they beg doctors to kill them. If properly treated, most symptoms go away within hours, but people with particular sensitivity can experience symptoms that last for up to 2 weeks, during which victims describe pain so intense that even powerful narcotic painkillers have little effect.
Physical strength can make the difference between life and death in the natural world. The strongest males of many animal species are the ones who get mates and food. The strongest animals can defend themselves against predators and survive longer than weaker ones. Today, we are still preoccupied with matters of physical strength, even though our modern-day existence does not require much of it. One way to determine the strength of an animal is by determining the amount of weight it can lift. However, in the wild, it is far more complicated than that. As we will see in this episode of the Infographic Show, strongest animals for their size and their abilities. Number 10. Elephants. Elephants are larger than any of the animals we will discuss today, but they are also the weakest relative to their size. One source states that they can weigh up to 7 tons, but they cannot lift much more beyond their own body weight. The most they can lift is 9 tons, which is 1.7 times its own weight. Number 9. Tigers. Tigers are stronger than elephants because they have the ability to drag prey that weighs twice as much as they do into trees. A Telegraph article states that tigers weigh close to 661 pounds, but they can carry double their body weight at about 1,190 pounds. Number 8. Humans. Humans made it into our discussion of the world's strongest animals in part because of world's strongest man champions like Eddie Hall and his 1,102-pound deadlift, which The Independent reported caused him to pass out and burst blood vessels in his head. Given that Hall weighs 410 pounds, he was lifting more than 2.5 times his body weight, which makes him slightly stronger than a tiger. However, there are 2 female athletes whose strength relative to their size surpasses that of Hall. Earlier this year, a competitive fitness magazine called Box Rocks reported that powerlifter Stephanie Cohen was able to lift 545 pounds. Cohen weighs only 124 pounds, so this means she was able to lift 4.3 times her own body weight. However, Cohen's impressive lift falls a little short of the 2016 record set by Chen Wei Ling, who won an Olympic bronze weightlifting medal for Taiwan in 2008. According to one source, Chen, who weighs only about 103 pounds, successfully performed a 463-pound single-ply squat, which is 4.5 times her body weight. And if we take unofficial records into consideration, weightlifter Paul Anderson could be considered the strongest man in the world. Anderson had an outstanding career as an amateur weightlifter and even won an Olympic gold medal in weightlifting for the US in 1956. In 1957, he supposedly backlifted 6,270 pounds, but controversy overshadowed his amazing feat of strength. A strength training website called Barbend notes that Anderson's lift was entered into the Guinness Book of World Records as the greatest weight ever raised by a human being, but it was later removed due to insufficient witnesses. If it did actually occur, it would mean that Anderson, who weighed between 330 to 360 pounds during his career, would have lifted about 17 to 19 times his body weight. This would have made him even stronger than the next 2 animals we will discuss. Number 7. African Crowned Eagle. The African Crowned Eagle may not be the largest eagle in the world, but it is arguably the strongest when you consider its size and ability. According to the Kloof Conservancy Bio Guide, the adult female of the species is larger than the adult male. The mass of female African crowned eagles is 10.4 pounds, while males weigh about 9 pounds. They are capable of capturing prey of up to 66 pounds, which means they can lift prey that is about 6 to 7.3 times their body weight. Their diet consists of mammals such as hyraxes, vervet monkeys, and small antelope. This powerful eagle also made it on Mother Nature Network's list of 5 birds that could steal your toddler. The article states that African crowned eagles have been known to occasionally attack or eat human children, including an early human child whose remains were discovered in a cave at Tuang, South Africa in 1924. Number 6. Gorillas. According to the World Wildlife Fund, gorillas are the largest living primates and live in Central and East Africa. They may share 98.3% of their DNA with humans, but gorillas are much stronger than people. The Telegraph notes that a male gorilla can weigh 440 pounds, but it can lift 2 tons, which is 10 times its body weight. One source notes that an adult male gorilla is 15 to 20 times stronger than a human. Number 5. Leafcutter ants. According to the Oakland Zoo, these dark red ants are approximately 0.7 inches in length. They survive by cutting leaves that are crushed and processed to help grow the only fungus they feed on, which is called Leucocoprinae. The Telegraph states that they can carry leaves that weigh 50 times their meager body weight, which is the equivalent of a human lifting 2.5 tons. Number 4. Asian weaver ants. An educational website called AntArc states that the weaver ant is found in Australia and Southeast Asia. These ants range in size from 0.19 to 0.2 inches for worker ants to about 0.3 to 0.4 inches for major work ants. The length of the queen ant is around 0.8 to 1 inch. They have strong mandibles that allow for a painful slicing bite, and they spray formic acid into any wounds. It is these powerful mandibles that allowed an Asian weaver ant to hold a 500 milligram weight, which Popular Science states is 100 times its body weight. University of Cambridge researchers photographed the ant's impressive feat, which was done while the ant was hanging upside down, and the picture won them first prize in a science photo contest. Number 3. Rhinoceros beetles. The National Wildlife Federation describes rhinoceros beetles as large insects that can grow up to 6 inches and can be found on every continent except Antarctica. They get their name from the fact that the male beetles have long horns on their heads, one of which bears a strong resemblance to a rhinoceros horn. A Popular Mechanics article states that these beetles have received popular acclaim as perhaps the proportionally strongest creatures on Earth, with some species said to be able to lift over 800 times their weight. Number 2. Dung beetles. Dung beetles live, eat, and reproduce in manure. According to the San Diego Zoo, they are scarabs and range in size from half an inch to 2.5 inches. The journal Science reports that the horned dung beetle is the strongest insect in the world, pulling up to 1,141 times its own body weight. This amount was determined with an experiment involving researchers gluing a cotton thread to the beetle's hard wing cases, stringing the thread across a pulley, and tying it to a miniature bucket to which they added drops of water. Number 1. Orobatid mite. Finally, the strongest land creature on Earth is the Orobatid mite. It is not an insect, but an arthropod, which one source describes as a creature related to, but distinct from, insects. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, the Orobatid mite lives in forest humus and soil and feeds on algae, fungi, or decaying material. A BBC article reports that this microscopic creature, weighing 0.1 milligrams, can hold 1,180 times its own weight and pull 540 times its own mass with its claws. You may have noticed that the strongest animals in the world are also some of the smallest. Why is this the case? This is due to what the BBC article calls a quirk of physics. Bigger animals have to devote most of their strength to moving their own weight around. This is not the case with smaller animals. Less body mass means they can dedicate more of their muscle power to weightlifting.
Chances are that you, like most people, tend to go for a swim in the ocean with no small amount of trepidation. You've seen Jaws, and you know what's out there, lurking and waiting, possibly hungry, with an eye on you right now. The fact that you typically can't see more than a few inches in turbulent seawater doesn't really help matters any. So you decide to stick to the shallows, except the shallows is where most shark attacks happen. Yet, while you're afraid of being eaten by a shark, what you should really be afraid of is tigers. Sharks kill on average 5 whole people a year. That's such a pathetic figure that we haven't researched it. But we're pretty sure more people die every year from sneezing to death than shark attacks. Despite those paltry numbers, there's likely not a single day you've been to the beach that you haven't eyed the waters warily and with no small amount of trepidation for the ancient, prehistoric, cold-blooded killer that could be lurking beneath the waves right now. While sharks are putting up rookie numbers, though, tigers are the LeBron James of animal fatalities, putting up real pro numbers on the board. On average, 85 people a year are killed or injured by tigers, and most of those fatalities occur in India. Thanks to a massively successful conservation effort, tiger numbers have rebounded from near extinction, and tigers decided to say thank you by doing what tigers have done for hundreds of thousands of years: eating people. We'd be mad, but then again, it was us that drove them to be almost extinct in the first place, so fair is fair, we suppose. Yet, today's tigers are nothing compared to the tigers of yesteryear, and in at least one case, your granddad might have been right. Things really were tougher in his time. That would be thanks to one particular tiger who stalked Nepal in 1903. Named the Champawat tiger, which we assume is ancient Nepalese for destroyer of man. This tiger got a taste for man flesh in 1903 and decided that we made for better hunting and eating than swift, agile deer. This tigress began making a regular meal out of local villagers, eating men, women, and children. Locals became so terrified that many refused to enter the jungle unless in large groups, and even this tactic wasn't always successful, as she learned to strike when individuals would wander away from the group, then drag her victim silently back to the jungle to feast. Villagers grew so terrified of the tigress that the government called up some of the best hunters in the land and sent them after her. The tigress managed to avoid all of their efforts and continued to kill, racking up an impressive kill count of 200 people. Eventually, the situation got so bad that the Nepalese army was called in to try to deal with the ferocious tiger, and even they would not prove to be enough to capture or kill her. She managed to avoid hundreds of armed soldiers, though at least she stopped killing villagers during the massive hunt. Unable to destroy her, the Nepalese army simply formed a massive line of soldiers and pushed through the thick jungle, forcing the tiger out of Nepal and into India. Having the tiger killing Indian villagers instead of Nepalese villagers was basically a good enough outcome for Nepal's government, and they called their forces off. As far as Nepal was concerned, she was India's problem now. In turn-of-the-century India and Africa, man-eating animals were basically par for the course, and thus legendary hunters arose to track down and destroy man-eaters. One of these hunters was Colonel James Corbett, a British hunter of Irish descent who operated inside of colonial India. When the tigress began to snack on Indian villagers, Colonel Corbett was immediately called up and asked to track and kill the man-eating tiger. He agreed, but only on two conditions: that all government rewards for killing of the tiger be cancelled, and that other hunters employed by the government be recalled. Corbett's reasoning was simple. As long as a large bounty remained on the tigress's head and other hunters prowled in the deep jungle, then he ran a high risk of being accidentally shot. Corbett also feared, however, that non-offending tigers would be destroyed in a public frenzy to find the one tigress responsible for the constant killing. The government quickly agreed to his terms, and in 1907, Corbett began his legendary hunt for the world's deadliest tiger. Female Bengal tigers weigh on average about 300 pounds and are 8 feet long from head to tail. When hunting the single deadliest tiger to ever stalk humans, you'd think that Corbett would have equipped himself with perhaps a suit of T-45 power armor, or at minimum a tactical nuclear weapon or two. But instead, Corbett took off into the deep jungle armed with nothing more than his trusty rifle and a proper, gloriously British mustache. Corbett tracked the tiger down to a village named Champawat, where he discovered that the locals had fortified themselves at home. Tiger roars had been heard in the jungle, and by now the tigress's reputation was so fierce that nobody dared to leave home, unless absolutely necessary. Some of the people had not left home for nearly a week. Soon after his arrival, though, the tigress struck again, this time killing a 16-year-old girl and dragging her lifeless body into the jungle to feed. This proved to be the last mistake the tigress would ever make, though, as she left behind tracks which were easy for Corbett to track and follow. Splashes of blood from the victim also helped to mark the tiger's path. After a few hours of tracking, Corbett ran straight into the tigress, interrupting her feasting, and the two immediately engaged in a duel to the death. The tigress leapt and lashed out with her razor-sharp claws, while Corbett deftly parried with his hunting rifle and counterattacked. Man and beast danced and weaved around each other in a deadly dance of death, claws and blades flashing, lashing out at each other, seeking an opening to land a mortal strike. Just kidding. Corbett pretty much just shot the tigress in the face because that's how guns work. And just like that, the reign of one of the deadliest tigers in history was over. Authorities would estimate that the Champawat tiger had killed and eaten 436 people during her 4-year reign of terror. But this might be an inaccurate number, as in turn-of-the-century India, tigers pretty regularly made a snack out of people. This means some of the kills attributed to the Champawat tiger may actually have been committed by other tigers. Before he launched his hunt for the tigress, Corbett had a theory, though, on why this particular tiger had taken to eating people. Believe it or not, people are not a regular diet item for tigers, which is kinda surprising because we are really just the worst at defending ourselves in the wild unless we have guns. While other animals have sharp claws, quills, spikes, fangs, or are really fast and agile, we pretty much got the short end of the stick when it comes to natural weapons. You'd think that at some point tigers would have figured out that we're basically the popcorn shrimp of the wild kingdom and make for a really easy prey. So if we aren't a normal part of a tiger's diet, Corbett reasoned that the tigress was likely under a large amount of stress, which forced her to change her eating habits. Perhaps prey was in short supply, and so she turned to eating humans. If that were true, she would have resumed to eating wild prey when forced across the border from Nepal. Thus, Corbett reasoned that the tigress probably suffered from some sort of debilitating injury, which left her unable to hunt wild game. That's right, humans are such pathetic creatures that when a tiger is too injured to hunt real prey, they turn to us instead. Like we said, humans are basically the popcorn shrimp of the animal kingdom. Sure enough, after killing her, Corbett discovered that the legendary Champawat tiger's fangs were broken. She had likely suffered from some periodontal disease and then struggled with prey, or perhaps was simply getting along in years and shattered several of her sharpened fangs. Unable to deliver quick and efficient killing blows, the tigress turned to humans, since you really don't need to do much to kill a human being. Corbett would go on to continue his career tracking down man-killing beasts, ending his career as a hunter after taking down the Bachelor of Polwagar, which is not a terrible reality show and was in fact one of the largest tigers ever recorded. Perhaps reflecting on the killing of such a magnificent animal, Corbett turned conservationist and helped establish India's first national park. He would die in 1955, and the park that he founded would be named after him, the Jim Corbett National Park. Today, tigers still like to occasionally snack on humans, and in the late 1980s, people living in the Ganges Delta in India discovered a surprising way to drastically reduce the number of tiger attacks on villages. The men of the Delta regularly had to trek through marshy swampland to various job sites, and these were prime hunting grounds for tigers. The tigers, who are ambush predators, could find perfect concealment in the tall grass. And if you've ever seen the Jurassic Park 2 scene where the raptors attacked in the tall grass, then you can pretty much accurately picture what would regularly happen to villagers. 60 people would die a year from tiger attacks in this one area alone, until people started getting into the tiger's head. Recognizing that tigers are ambush predators, the villagers began to wear Halloween masks on their heads backwards. The pair of eyes on the back of their head would fool the tigers into thinking that they were being watched and didn't have the element of surprise. As insane as this sounds, the tactic worked, and tiger attacks dropped off steeply in the following months. Today, the tactic is still used in many places in India, and it turns out that for all their ferocity, tigers have a bit of a self-esteem problem. If they think they can't get the jump on a prey item, they simply won't even try. For us, we're just grateful that tigers have low self-esteem and don't realize that whether we see them coming or not, humans could do literally nothing to stop a tiger attack. Because once more, we're basically the popcorn shrimp of the animal kingdom. The Champawat tiger may be the pound-for-pound champ of man-eaters, but there have been quite a few other famous human hunters that have given her a run for her money. There were the man-eating lions of Kenya, who made meals of 135 people, the leopards of India's central provinces, who took down 150, and who could forget Gustav, the famed 18-foot, 2,000-pound crocodile of Burundi, who's estimated to have eaten over 300 humans. And while just like the Champawat tiger, all of their kill counts are rough estimates at best, it just goes to show you that humans often aren't the apex predator of their environment. Before we get to our list of the world's most venomous animals, we'd like to make a distinction between poisonous and venomous. A poisonous animal carries and can secrete toxins. However, a human has to ingest, inhale, or touch the animal to be poisoned. If you bite it and you die, it's poisonous. Venomous means that the animal actively seeks to deliver toxins through a bite, sting, stab, or spit, usually as a defense or in the pursuit of prey. If it bites you and you die, it's venomous. Also, this list of the most venomous animals aren't necessarily the most deadly or dangerous venomous animals for humans. There are some animals whose venom is far less deadly, but more humans are injured and killed by them each year simply because humans come into contact with them more frequently. We've taken a number of factors into consideration for creating this list, such as how much venom the animals tend to deliver during an attack, how quickly death occurs, and the LD50 or median lethal dose rating of the animal. The LD50 provides an estimation of how dangerous a particular venom or toxin, as determined by how much venom is needed to kill 50% of a test population of lab test animals, usually mice. Even if you disagree with our rankings, you can agree that every animal listed is lethal. On with the list. Number 10. Brazilian wandering spider. Number 10 on our list is the Brazilian wandering spider, a nomadic nocturnal arachnid which got its name because it travels from place to place to find food rather than building a web. It's also known as the banana spider because of its propensity for hiding in yellow fruit. It can be found in South and Central American countries. Occasionally it ends up in England or America, showing up as a horrid surprise for someone purchasing a bunch of bananas. While the Brazilian wandering spiders nest on the ground in the forest, they also like hiding in dark, moist places such as piled logs, garages, shoes, and closets. As a defense mechanism, Brazilian wandering spiders stand on their hind legs and swing side to side in warning before attacking. A bite from this spider causes severe pain at the site of the wound, often with inflammation. Within about 30 minutes, systemic envenomation occurs, characterized by symptoms such as hypertension or hypotension, arrhythmia, nausea, cramping, hypothermia, vertigo, blurred vision, convulsions, and paralyzation. If the spider injects enough venom when it bites you, you can die within an hour from respiratory complications. However, in most cases, bites from Brazilian wandering spiders don't contain enough venom to require antivenom. However, victims should immediately seek medical treatment. Even if the spider didn't deliver a fatal dose of venom, it can cause tissue necrosis. 0.006 milligrams of its venom is enough to kill a mouse. Interestingly, the venom of the Brazilian wandering spider contains a toxin called TX26 that causes priapism, or long, painful erections in males lasting several hours, which can lead to impotence or enhanced potency depending on the victim. Number 9. King Cobra. Native to South and Southeast Asia, these typically 10 to 15-foot king cobras are the largest venomous snakes in the world. The largest king cobra ever found was just over 19 feet. Generally, their prey is other smaller snakes and lizards, which they envenomate and then use their flexible jaws to swallow their paralyzed prey whole. Typically, king cobras are non-aggressive and shy, but as their highland forest's home was encroached on, they're coming into contact with humans more and more. In humans, the risk of death from a king cobra bite is somewhere around 75%. The painful bite can cause the death of a healthy adult human within 15 minutes, although it generally takes 30 to 45 minutes. The king cobra is even capable of killing a full-grown Asian elephant within 3 hours if the pachyderm is bitten in a vulnerable area such as the trunk. 7 milliliters, or slightly less than 1 1/2 teaspoons, of a king cobra's venom can kill 20 adult humans or 1 elephant. The king cobra's venom attacks the victim's central nervous system, resulting in agonizing pain, blurred vision, vertigo, and eventually paralysis. If the envenomation is serious, it progresses to failure of the circulatory system and the victim falls into a coma, then dies. Antivenom is available in small doses. A traditional Ayurvedic concoction of turmeric and alcohol has also had some success in treating king cobra bite sufferers. Number 8. Sydney funnel web spider. The Sydney funnel web spider is number 8 on our list of the most venomous animals in the world. It belongs to a family of approximately 35 spiders native to Australia. 6 spiders of the species are venomous, considered dangerous, and are known to cause grave injuries to humans. The male Sydney funnel web spider is most likely to come in contact with humans as it travels to search for a mate. The spider delivers a painful bite with its large fangs, and the wound often bleeds. The spider doesn't always inject its victims with venom, but when it does, watch out. The venom contains a neurotoxin which attacks the nervous system and organs in a human. Fatalities can occur anywhere from 15 minutes in small children to 3 days for a healthy adult. The venom of this spider is reputedly 60 times as potent as cyanide. Symptoms of envenomation present almost immediately. Early symptoms include sweating, twitching, elevated heart rate, and elevated blood pressure. As the venom spreads throughout the body, symptoms include nausea, vomiting, muscle spasms, pulmonary edema, metabolic acidosis, and extreme hypertension. Often victims fall into a coma before death. Number 7. Boomslang. The boomslang is a tree snake native to sub-Saharan Africa, described as shy and pretty, with large eyes and with bright, light green color in males and brown in females. Boomslangs are rear-fanged snakes. Their fangs are far back in their mouths behind their other teeth, which means to envenomate they have to open their mouths really wide, up to 170 degrees, to grab a chunk of flesh and stab. When venomously bitten by a boomslang, a victim experiences several symptoms, such as headache, nausea, and sleepiness. However, the most dangerous aspect of boomslang venom is that it's a hemotoxin with anticoagulating properties. In addition to destroying red blood cells, loosening blood clotting, and tissue degeneration, victims suffer extensive muscle and brain hemorrhaging. Death happens via progressive internal bleeding and is a slow, excruciating process taking anywhere from 3 to 5 days. It can also be messy and embarrassing, as blood leaks out of every orifice. Since boomslang venom is slow-acting and symptoms may take several hours to set in after a venomous bite, in the past victims have been lulled into a false sense of security that the bite was dry or not serious. Symptoms may be counteracted with an antivenom and also blood transfusions depending on the amount of time between the bite and the victim seeking medical attention. Number 6. Coastal Taipan. The coastal taipan, or common taipan, is native to New Guinea and also the coastal regions of northern and eastern Australia. Adult coastal taipans typically range in size from 4.9 to 6.6 feet and tend to live in logs, piles of vegetation, and have even been found in trash heaps. Bite victims may experience a wide variety of symptoms, including headache, vomiting, convulsions, paralysis, internal bleeding, and kidney failure. In cases of severe envenomation, depending on the health of the victim, death can occur within 30 minutes of being bitten, but on average takes 2.5 hours. The venom of the coastal taipan contains a potent neurotoxin which affects the nervous system and the blood's ability to clot. Medical attention must be sought immediately. Untreated bites have a mortality rate of 100%, as the coastal taipan always delivers a fatal dose of venom. The average bite delivers 10 to 12 times the dose needed to kill a human adult male. Number 5. Irukandji jellyfish. Irukandji jellyfish primarily live in the ocean off the coast of northern Australia. They're the smallest jellyfish in the world, with an adult being a single cubic centimeter. For being so tiny, they are incredibly dangerous. They can shoot stingers into their victim, causing symptoms collectively known as Irukandji syndrome. While a single sting tends to be only mildly painful, apparently it feels similar to a mosquito bite. The victims are usually struck with multiple barbs, and the venom effects aren't immediate. In anywhere from 5 to 120 minutes, with 30 minutes being the average, a victim begins to experience symptoms including severe headache, muscle pains, vomiting, sweating, paranoia, hypertension, tachycardia, and pulmonary edema. Thankfully, while often severely painful, Irukandji syndrome is not necessarily fatal, depending on the dose delivered. Symptoms generally improve in 4 to 30 hours, but it may take up to 2 weeks for a patient to make a full recovery. With a fatal dose, victims often expire within 24 hours of the attack due to brain hemorrhages. Since Irukandji jellyfish are so tiny and delicate, they've proven hard to study in the hopes of creating a targeted antivenom. Current treatment is symptomatic, such as antihistamines and antihypertensive drugs used to control inflammation and hypertension. Pain management can be problematic, as in some cases, morphine has little effect. Number 4. Blue-ringed octopus. The typical adult blue-ringed octopus is about the size of a golf ball and lives off the coasts of Australia and Southeast Asia. Though usually non-aggressive, when provoked, it delivers debilitating and deadly venom for which there is no antidote. The average adult blue-ringed octopus carries enough venom to kill 26 male adults, and it's 10,000 times more potent than cyanide. Before it attacks, the octopus usually issues a warning by turning an intense blue color. While the bite is generally painless, within 10 minutes a victim can go into a respiratory failure and expire within half an hour. In some victims, symptoms may occur hours later. The blue-ringed octopus venom contains neurotoxins which causes muscular weakness and numbness, followed by respiratory failure and ultimately death. Number 3. Inland taipan. The inland taipan, or fierce snake, inhabits semi-arid regions of Central East Australia and is considered the world's most venomous snake. It's estimated that one bite is enough of a lethal dose to kill at least 100 male adults, or about 250,000 mice. Its venom is considered at least 200 to 400 times more toxic than the common cobra. Even worse, the inland taipan has extreme accuracy when attacking, often striking multiple times in the same attack, and it nearly always injects venom rather than delivering a dry bite. Victims should seek medical attention immediately. If left untreated, an inland taipan bite can kill a human in 30 to 45 minutes. Aside from pain and inflammation at the site of the bite, symptoms include headache, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. The victim then collapses or goes into convulsions, leading to major organ failure and finally death. Fortunately, there have been no documented human fatalities from an inland taipan bite. All known bite victims have been successfully treated with antivenom. Number 2. Cone snail. The second most venomous animal in the world is the cone snail. The name cone snail encapsulates a family of several hundred species of marine gastropods. All of them are extremely venomous and dangerous to humans. They typically live in tropical seas in the sand or among coral reefs and rocks. They move slowly. Their venom is used to capture prey. Fortunately, they can be easily avoided. If you're foolish enough to pick up a live cone snail, you may be courting death. They shoot harpoon-like sharp teeth from their mouths to sting and then pump venom into their victims via muscular contraction. The harpoon of a large cone snail can even penetrate wetsuits. Intense pain at the site of the sting is often immediately felt, followed by swelling, numbness, tingling, and vomiting. Severe cases rapidly cause muscle paralysis, changes in vision, and respiratory failure that can lead to death. The venom of larger cone snails can potentially kill a human in 4 minutes, though it generally takes longer. A venom dose fatal to humans is incredibly small. It's thought that the venom in one cone snail is enough to kill 20 adults. Researchers are studying some species of cone snail in order to harness the toxins to create various pharmaceutical drugs. A chemical extracted from the venom of the magical cone snail is a painkiller, 1,000 times more potent than morphine. Number 1. Australian box jellyfish. The world's most venomous animal title goes to the Australian box jelly. It's one of the world's most deadliest animals, as humans fairly frequently come into contact with them. Since jellyfish aren't really fish, biologists have dropped the fish part from its name. No matter what you call it, if an Australian box jelly stings you, you're having a really bad day. It carries enough venom to kill 60 adults. This species of box jelly can primarily be found in the oceans around Asia and Australia. Box jellies are virtually transparent in the water. Adults can measure up to about 12 inches in diameter in the box or bell-shaped core body, and the tentacles can grow nearly 10 feet in length. Each box jelly has around 15 tentacles on each corner of its box. Each tentacle has about 5,000 nematocysts, or microscopic harpoon-shaped barbs, that inject venom into the victim. Within minutes of envenomation, the victim experiences extreme pain, paralysis, delirium, skin necrosis, and may even go into cardiac arrest. Box jelly venom is so excruciatingly painful that human victims often go straight into shock and drown or die of heart failure before even reaching shore. Despite some recent controversial studies which think the remedy causes more damage than good, box jelly stings should be treated immediately with an application of vinegar for at least 30 seconds. The acetic acid in vinegar neutralizes the box jelly's nematocysts that have not yet discharged into the bloodstream. Any stray tentacles should be removed. After that, the victim should be immersed in hot water, which will help reduce the intensity and duration of the pain. More minor stings can be treated with ice packs, topical and oral pain medications. Whether a box jelly attack is lethal or not depends on how much venom is injected into the victim. The vast majority of victims survive stings, and the odds of survival are almost 100% if the victim makes it through the first 10 minutes of the attack. Around 50 people are killed annually by box jellyfish. However, that number may be grossly underreported because death certificates are not required in many countries within the range of box jellies. In the spring of 2019, scientists announced headway into making possible antidotes which could be life-saving if administered within 15 minutes of a victim being stung. October 4th, 2003. He thought he was being pranked. Emergency Service Unit cop Martin Duffy thought the old-timer was hazing him when he reported to work and was told his mission for the afternoon, but it was no joke. Soon, Officer Duffy found himself climbing out of a window on the 7th floor and rappelling down the side of a 21-story Harlem apartment building. At the 5th floor, he dangled, peering into an apartment window, then took aim and fired a tranquilizer dart gun. The dart hit the 400-pound tiger in the rump. Enraged, the massive cat roared, showing off long, wicked-looking canines, and then charged toward the window. From the time he was little, Antoine Yates adored animals. He was always bringing home stray puppies or injured birds. His mother Martha indulged his love, allowing her son to keep a variety of pets throughout his childhood. As Antoine got older, his interests turned to more exotic animals. The peace he found in taking care of animals was a refuge against the dangerous, crime-infested Harlem neighborhood where he grew up in the early 1980s. While his brother Aaron took to the streets, Antoine was inside with his pets. Over time, he had boa constrictors and several other reptiles, capuchin and squirrel monkeys. In the spring of 2000, the Yates family, which included a rotating group of foster kids, was living in a 5-bedroom apartment in the Drew Hamilton houses, a huge dismal housing project built in the 1960s. Antoine, now in his early 30s, concocted a plan with his mother and sister to open a zoo. He already owned 2 pythons and a caiman. Despite only being a part-time taxi driver, Antoine was able to save up thousands of dollars and falsify papers to prove he had a zoo in order to purchase a lion club from the Bearcat Hollow Animal Park in Racine, Minnesota. Later, Antoine also purchased Ming, an 8-week-old Siberian Bengal hybrid tiger cub from the same breeders. In addition to his other pets, eventually Antoine ended up with 2 lions and 2 tiger cubs. Not long after, his mom and sister backed out of the zoo project and Antoine was forced to give up his new pets. Antoine rehomed the pythons, lion cubs, and one of the tigers, but kept Al the caiman and Ming the tiger cub, whom he especially loved. Over the next 3 years, Antoine raised Ming in the Yates family's 5th-floor apartment. He fed him bottles around the clock. Ming quickly graduated to pureed meat and then meat chunks. Martha gradually became unhappy with the living situation. Fearing for her and her children's safety, she and 2 foster children moved to Philadelphia, relinquishing apartment E5 to her son. Antoine built Ming a sandpit complete with balls. Al the caiman, who lived in another bedroom, had a custom fiberglass tank. Sometimes Antoine would freeze a pan of liver and give Ming a giant meat popsicle. By the time Ming was 3 in 2003, he'd weighed over 400 pounds. Antoine was feeding him about 20 pounds of raw chicken a day. The tiger was a semi-open secret. Some of Antoine's friends and neighbors were aware of the big cat. Across the way, there was a senior citizen center as part of the apartment complex. Ming used to stand on his hind legs and look out the window. Aaron joked with his brother about the workers at the retirement home thinking that the old people were senile when they claimed to have seen a tiger looking out of an apartment window. On and off, Antoine had roommates who were at first scared but became accustomed to the tiger. Antoine went through bouts of depression where he was a recluse. He would mainly meditate and hang out with Ming. One day, Antoine found a small black kitten. As always, he took the stray home, naming it Shadow. He kept Shadow in a bedroom away from the tiger. Unfortunately, Shadow got out. Territorial Ming went for the kitten. Antoine tried to intervene and protect it. Aaron had a premonition that something was wrong and rushed over to the apartment to find his brother Antoine in shock. Ming had severely bitten Antoine's arm and leg. Aaron called 911, but there was no way they wanted the paramedics coming to the apartment and discovering Ming. Aaron helped his brother down to the lobby where they were met by police. Antoine was transported to the Harlem Hospital Center, where he claimed that he'd been attacked by a bulldog. However, the doctors were suspicious. The bites looked like they came from an animal with a much larger jaw. Meanwhile, the police received 2 anonymous tips in the next few days following the attack. One said there was a wild animal somewhere in the city. The second call directed them to the exact address. That evening, a policeman came knocking on the door of apartment E5 for a welfare check. No one was home, but the officer heard loud growling noises coming from the apartment. Wisely, he decided to not go in. The officer talked to a neighbor who complained of large amounts of urine and a strong smell coming through the ceiling. Officers from TARU, the Technical Assistance Response Unit, drilled a hole through the neighbor's wall to get a visual of what was inside the apartment. They saw a mattress that had been shredded as if it were made of paper, claw marks scratched down the wall from ceiling to floor, and then Ming wandered into view. 400 pounds of rippling muscled cat, over 9 feet tall when he stood on his hind legs. The massive tiger was even shocking to jaded police who thought they had seen it all. The tiger was left alone for the night. The apartment cordoned off while the police formulated a plan. They didn't want to have to kill the tiger, yet they had to safely remove the big cat from the apartment while keeping the public protected. They called animal experts, including Dr. Robert A. Cook, the head veterinarian at the Bronx Zoo, for help. The next day, from the apartment below on the 4th floor, the police raised a pole-mounted camera out of the window to keep track of Ming. Meanwhile, on the 7th floor, the police laid out a strategy. Dr. Cook prepared tranquilizer darts for the chosen marksman, Officer Duffy, and gave him advice. Around 4:30 p.m., police sniper Duffy, armed both with a tranquilizer dart gun and a rifle with live ammunition, abseiled down to the 5th floor. Meanwhile, the word had gotten out about the tiger. The media, along with a curious crowd of citizens, gathered below to watch. Dangling in a rope sling, Officer Duffy peered into the bedroom window of apartment E5. He could clearly see Ming peacefully chilling on the bedroom floor. The tiger looked back at the policeman and then turned slightly, giving Duffy a good view of his hind quarters. Duffy held the tranquilizer gun up to the window, making sure that the barrel wasn't blocked by the child's safety slings. Scarcely breathing, he pulled the trigger. The dart landed true, hitting Ming in the butt. The tiger jumped up and went berserk. He roared and charged the window. The building shook as the massive cat smashed into the window, cracking it. As the tiger headbutted the window again, Duffy worried that the glass would give way. If the big cat survived the fall, they'd have an angry, injured tiger on a crowded public street. Duffy took aim and shot again. The second dart shot caused Ming to retreat. He laid down in a nest of plastic trash bags. About 12 minutes later, the tiger tried to get up but staggered, feeling the effects of the sedation. After waiting another 5 minutes, guarded by a group of emergency service unit officers, Dr. Cook and another zoo staffer cautiously entered the apartment. Ming lay in a corner, The zoo staff slipped a restraint pole around Ming's head and gave him a little more sedative by injection to make sure he was sedated enough to transport. Ming was then lifted onto a gurney. A fire department oxygen mask was clamped to his face. The gurney was carefully wheeled down the hall and onto the elevator. Once they were on the street, officers had to force the crowd back as a half-dozen men struggled to hoist Ming into the back of an animal care and control box truck. The police also removed Al the Cayman, who was nearly 5 feet long, a rabbit, and several other exotic and domestic pets from the apartment. Allegedly, Antoine had a second tiger, some bear cubs, 2 Rottweilers, more rabbits, and a tarantula. Ming was taken to the Center for Animal Care and Control on 110th Street and given a checkup. Despite the fact that he was raised in a tiny New York apartment, the tiger was relatively healthy. Meanwhile, Antoine mysteriously checked out of the hospital. Authorities finally located him in Philadelphia, where he was being treated at the University of Pennsylvania Medical Center. Antoine was arrested on charges of reckless endangerment and the possession of a wild animal. Eventually, he was able to get some pro bono help to fight the case. He also had some support from people in the community. During his court proceedings, a small crowd gathered outside of the courthouse to chant, "Free Tiger Man!" Antoine's lawyers presented him as maybe a little misguided, but someone who deeply loved animals. Later, Martha Yates was charged with endangering the welfare of a child, since she kept foster children in the apartment. As part of a plea agreement to reduce charges against his mother, Antoine pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment. He was sentenced to a 5-month prison term with 5 years probation. Antoine was released after serving only 3 months. He sued New York City for the loss of his pets and for $7,000 cash, which he claimed had also been in the apartment when the police raided it. A judge quickly dismissed the case, calling Antoine full of chutzpah. Since losing Ming and spending time in jail, Antoine's life had been a bit of a mystery. For a while, Antoine tried to get a job with several different exotic professional animal handlers, but no one wanted to work with him. He was notorious, and the idea of keeping a magnificent animal in a tiny apartment left a bad taste in some people's mouths. In the intervening years, Antoine's been interviewed at various times by the media. A few documentaries have been made about the tiger raised in Harlem. In October 2010, the Animal Planet channel featured the story of Antoine Yates and Ming on the show Fatal Attractions. For some time, Antoine's claimed to be on the verge of various deals to open a zoo and get Ming back. He's also made many unverifiable claims about different jobs he's had working with exotic cats. Ming is now 19 and has lived at the Noah's Lost Ark Animal Sanctuary in Berlin Center, Ohio, after being moved there from the Center for Animal Care and Control in 2003. Al was also rehomed to an animal sanctuary. The tale of Antoine Yates and Ming, admittedly, is the most extreme case of owning an exotic animal. Though the number is slowly growing due to recent conservation programs, researchers estimate that there are only about 4,000 tigers left in the wild worldwide. There are a couple thousand tigers in the US, with upwards of 500 big cats privately owned as pets. Humans are the most intelligent species on Earth, even if sometimes we don't behave that way. Yet all of our perceived shortcomings are in fact evolutionary success stories. Our greed ensures that we survive at all costs. In the wild, it's far better to overindulge today when food is available than try to ration or be altruistic and risk famine or disaster tomorrow. Our complete disregard for the environment is likewise the pinnacle of natural evolution. Despite what your hippie best friend may tell you, there's no balance in nature. Balance is achieved only through death. A species will overpopulate and overconsume until resource scarcity forces it into balance by starving most members to death. While we may be nature's greatest success story, we have exacted a terrible price on other animals that share this world with us. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographic Show. Today we're taking a look at the top 10 animals that went extinct because humans suck. Number 10. Quagga. Quaggas were zebra-like animals that stood about 4 to 4 feet 5 inches at the shoulder. It had zebra-like stripes in the front half of its torso, but perplexingly lost those stripes halfway down its body until it ended up in a stripe-free horse-like rear end. Unlike zebras though, the quagga stripes were light on a darker background, though some argue that this was an optical illusion and that the primary colors of the quagga were lighter with a dark stripe. Quaggas had a very limited range even in their prime, sticking to the very southern edges of traditional zebra territory in Africa and mainly living south of the Orange River. Quaggas were observed in herds of 30 to 50, and many accounts say they traveled in a very linear fashion. The name quagga comes from the distinctive sound these animals made as they called out to each other. Ultimately, it was overhunting and competition with domestic cattle that led to the quagga's demise, along with its extremely limited distribution in the wild. Though a captive breeding program attempted to save the species, only a single male was secured with no females, and attempts to breed with a horse resulted in a hybrid that did not bring back the original species. By 1878, the last wild quagga died and the species went extinct. Number 9. Golden toad. Another species vulnerable to extinction, the golden toad, was a small toad that inhabited a small, high-altitude region of 1.5 square miles in Costa Rica. First discovered in 1964, the last sighting of a golden toad occurred on the 15th of May 1989, and since extinction has become the poster child for the amphibian decline crisis. From their first discovery in 1964, population surveys of about 1,500 members were recorded until 1987. Knowing how fragile the toad was and the limited amount of habitable space for this highly specialized species, a reserve of 4 square kilometers was established and eventually expanded to over 105 square kilometers. Conservation efforts proved in vain though, and in 1988 only 10 or 11 toads were observed. The last observed toad was on May 15, 1989, and the species is now extinct. Many blame global warming for its extinction, but the theory has since been disputed and other alternates put forward. 8. Thylacine, or Tasmanian tiger. Due to its geographic isolation, mammals in Australia took a weird evolutionary path after the fall of the dinosaurs, resulting in an explosion of marsupials that are unique to the continent. One of these predatory marsupials was the thylacine, or Tasmanian tiger, because of its distinctive striping that ran along its back. Once native to Australia, Tasmania, and New Guinea, the thylacine was a shy, nocturnal creature that was the size of a medium or large dog. Thanks to human hunting and brush fires, the thylacine had already become extremely rare prior to the arrival of British settlers. An increase in human population starting 4,000 years ago and the arrival of the dingo, which directly competed for food, saw thylacine numbers plummet. After going extinct on mainland Australia, a surviving population eked out an existence on the island of Tasmania. Yet, falsely portrayed as a threat to livestock, bounties on thylacine heads, including pups, were paid out by local governments, which paid as much as £1 or £100 in today's money per head. Persecuted by hunters and farmers, the last known thylacine killed in the wild was shot in 1930 by farmer Wilf Batty. 7. Megalodapus, or the koala lemur. Megalodapus, or the koala lemur, was one of the 3 extinct species of lemurs that inhabited Madagascar. About 4 to 5 feet in length and 110 pounds in weight, koala lemurs would have been one of the biggest lemurs on the island. Perfectly evolved to live in trees, its body was squat and built more like a modern koala, hence the name. And it had long arms with fingers, feet, and toes specialized for grasping trees. Unlike other lemurs, the koala lemur had curved hands and feet, and its ankles and wrists lacked the stability needed to travel on the ground. Soon after the arrival of humans in Madagascar 2,300 years ago, the island's giant lemur populations went into steep decline. As humans cleared the jungle with controlled burns to make room for farmland, the exposed land turned to grassland, which did not suit the lemurs. This led to a population crash which ended in extinction 500 to 600 years ago. 6. Steller sea cow. From the same family as the dugong, Steller sea cows were giant ocean-faring mammals that grew to 30 feet in length and weighed up to 10 tons. It fed mainly on kelp and communicated with sighs and snorts. Discovered in 1741, they were named after naturalist George Wilhelm Steller, who observed the mammals while shipwrecked on Bering Island. Like many animals on this list, the sea cow was already vulnerable to extinction, having a highly limited range that covered the Commander Islands in the Bering Sea. Valued for its meat, fat, and hide, the very slow-moving sea cow was hunted to complete extinction 27 years after its discovery. 5. Syrian wild ass. Once ranging across present-day Iraq, Palestine, Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Turkey, the Syrian wild ass was the smallest of all equines, reaching only 1 meter at the shoulder. Yet despite its small stature, the Syrian wild ass was completely untamable and compared to thoroughbred horses for its beauty and strength. European travelers during the 15th and 16th centuries reported large herds of the animal, but overhunting started dropping its numbers in the 18th and 19th century. Its numbers were further impacted by the chaos that ensued during World War I, and the last known wild specimen was shot in 1927. 4. Elephant bird. Weighing in at a whopping 1,600 pounds and standing 9.8 feet tall, the elephant bird was one of a family of huge flightless birds that lived on the island of Madagascar. Laying eggs that weighed up to 22 pounds, elephant birds were an impressive specimen indeed, and their eggs would have made for a hell of an omelet. Originally widespread, scientists believe that the arrival of humans led to a decrease in bird populations. Due to its small landmass, one theory known as the Blitzkrieg hypothesis states that humans very quickly overhunted the elephant bird populations in Madagascar. An alternate theory, however, states that it was the transfer of diseases from domesticated birds the humans brought with them, such as chickens, that led to extinction for the elephant birds of isolated Madagascar. In all likelihood, it was a combination of the two, as European explorers reported regularly finding remains of their giant eggshells among native villages, with huge pieces of eggshell at times used as bowls. Overhunted or wiped out by disease, reports on the ultimate extinction date vary, but most believe they were wiped out by 1000 AD. 3. Caucasian Viscent. The Caucasian Viscent was a species of buffalo that roamed the Caucasus Mountains of Eastern Europe. Hunted for centuries, its numbers remained relatively steady until the 17th century, when human settlement in the mountains intensified. By the end of the 19th century, its range had shrunk to a mere 1/10 of its previous habitat. In 1860, its population numbered about 2,000, but by 1917, only 500 to 600 remained. 4 years later, in 1921, its numbers plummeted to just 50. With local poaching of these magnificent beasts, the last 3 Caucasian Viscents were killed in 1927. Descending from a single bull born in 1907 and kept in captivity in Germany, hybrid Viscents survive to this day in low numbers. Yet those hybrids are mostly made up of American bison hybrids, and they are today described as a different subspecies. 2. Caribbean monk seal. The only known seal to inhabit the Caribbean monk seal was a species of monk seal native to the warm waters of the tropical latitudes. They were also some of the largest specimens, reaching sizes of up to 8 feet in length and weighing in between 375 and 600 pounds. Colored brownish or grayish, these monk seals had a lighter underside similar to many sharks today. This helped them avoid being spotted from above or below by prey animals. Their bodies also hosted growths of algae, giving some of them a slightly greenish appearance. The first mention of the Caribbean monk seal comes from the second voyage of Christopher Columbus, when in August 1494 his ship laid anchor off the island of Altavelo, and a party of men went ashore and killed 8 seals they found on land. Records throughout the colonial period make many mention of the docile seals being hunted for meat, and ultimately in the 18th and 19th centuries the seals would be hunted exhaustively for their meat and oil. After a 5-year search, the species was officially declared extinct in 2008. 1. Russian Tracker. The Russian Tracker is an extinct breed of dog that was for hundreds of years used to herd cattle and chase off wild wolves. Related to today's yellow Russian retrievers, the Tracker was by all accounts an extremely hardy dog that weighed in at 100 pounds and stood 30 inches at the shoulder. This fierce and stalwart companion was valued for its fearless nature and its ability to chase off wolves and wild bears, keeping its flock safe. Highly intelligent, legend said that a Tracker could keep itself and its flock alive for months with no human help whatsoever. Unlike the rest of the animals on this list, the Russian Tracker met its extinction via crossbreeding, suffering the same fate as many cat and dog breeds of yesteryear. It's not known exactly when it went extinct, but purebreds could still be found well into the late 1800s. Humanity has extracted a terrible toll on the species of this world, but even though it can be tempting to think we are unnatural freaks and somehow apart from nature, the truth is that we are simply nature at its finest, most successful form. Life routinely overconsumes and edges out lesser-suited competitors into extinction, and the only balance ultimately comes from death. Evolution, it seems, is a force hell-bent on mass murder, giving us all the natural qualities that we have indulged in for thousands of years that have made us the most successful and the most terrible of species. Yet ultimately, it's on us to use the one gift evolution gave us to put an end to the cycle of death. Because unlike any other species to have ever walked the face of this earth, we alone can look back on the trail of corpses left in our wake and feel remorse. Only we alone can overcome nature and paradoxically protect her, or we can choose not to. Nature doesn't care either way, and long after we've destroyed the world and ourselves, she'll pick up the pieces and start again, exactly as she has many times before. The biggest great white shark ever discovered and reliably measured was a 20-foot-long, 7,330-pound shark found off the waters of Cuba in 1945. Yet, even larger sharks have been reportedly caught. One in South Australia in 1870 measured 36 feet and another measuring 37 feet, though both have been dismissed by biologists due to the sheer size, claiming it's impossible great whites could grow that big. Yet, what if those sharks caught were real and not just fish stories? And what if they weren't necessarily great whites? Hello and welcome to another special episode of the Infographics Show's Greatest Mysteries. Today, we're taking a look at the Megalodon shark and asking the question, does it still live? Most scientists believe the Megalodon went extinct about 2 million years ago, and that's good news for anybody who enjoys taking dips in the ocean, as these monsters grew to sizes up to 59 feet in length and sported teeth 7 inches long. As the largest predatory fish to have ever lived, the Megalodon fed on a variety of prey, but its preferred prey was without a doubt whales. By examining the remains of fossilized whale skeletons that bear the scars of a Megalodon attack, scientists have been able to learn a lot about its hunting strategies. While a great white prefers to ambush prey with a single bite and then let it bleed out, the Megalodon would attack the tough, bony portions of its prey such as shoulders, flippers, ribcage, and upper spine, crushing bone and rupturing organs. A single bite to a whale's backbone could paralyze the animal, leaving the Megalodon to feed at its leisure. And with a bite force between 24,400 and 41,000 pounds, crushing tough whale bones would have been a simple task for a giant shark. But Megalodons didn't just eat whales. As opportunistic hunters, they would prey on seals, sea lions, dolphins, and generally anything smaller than itself, which made nearly the entire ocean fair game. Paleontologists have even discovered the shattered shells of giant sea turtles bearing the telltale scars of a Megalodon attack. For decades, scientists have assumed that Megalodon died out toward the start of the latest ice age, theorizing that because, like modern sharks, it was unable to regulate its body temperature, cooling waters eventually led to extinction. Yet, a 2016 study showed that there seemed to be no correlation between climate change and Megalodon's decline, instead linking the giant shark's extinction to the rise of smaller, more agile predators and the decline of large prey, such as filter-feeding whales, which began dying off around the same time. This new discovery has been groundbreaking for believers in Megalodon's continued survival, as mainstream science has long held that because Megalodon lived exclusively in warm waters, that it could not have survived through the ice age like the great white did, which frequents cold waters. If cooling climate didn't cause the Megalodon to go extinct though, could a small, relic population have retreated to deeper waters in search of large enough prey to sustain it? This is the most commonly held theory on Megalodon's continued survival, with proponents pointing at recent discoveries in great white behavior that showed the sharks regularly dive to very deep depths in search of food. With giant squid thought to grow up to 43 feet, Megalodon may have found a suitable prey in the deepest depths. If forced to hunt large squid, it would explain why Megalodon is unknown to science. The first live giant squid ever filmed was only caught as recently as 2012, and with a tiny fraction of the oceans explored by mankind, there's no telling what else is out there. Proponents for the Megalodon's survival also point at the recent discoveries of other fish thought to be extinct for millions of years, such as the megamouth shark. Discovered alive and well in 1976, a bizarre-looking fish was thought extinct for a whopping 65 million years until one was fished up in 1938. So could a Megalodon still be alive somewhere in the deepest oceans today? Is there any evidence? In 1875, the HMS Challenger, out on a deep-sea expedition, dredged up a pair of Megalodon teeth, which were later dated as being 10,000 to 15,000 years old. This moves the date up for the last living Megalodon to just before the start of human civilization. And if one Megalodon survived past the Ice Age, then it's not a stretch for the imagination to believe that others did too, and may continue to thrive in the deepest depths. Unfortunately, because shark skeletons are made up of cartilage, which quickly disintegrates in seawater, only teeth survive a Megalodon's death, so the odds of finding teeth from modern Megalodons lurking in extremely deep water are astronomically low. Yet eyewitness accounts describing giant sharks abound throughout human history, and while most are likely nothing more than tall tales or fish stories, the sheer number of them begs the suggestion that there may be some truth to them. In 1918, Australian naturalist David Steed recorded that a group of local fishermen refused to go back out to sea after encountering a shark of incredible proportions. Per Steed's notes, the fishermen of Port Stephens reported working at their fishing grounds in deep water when suddenly an enormous ghostly white shark rose from the depths and attacked their crayfish pots, devouring the 3-foot 6-inch pots and crayfish inside whole. The giant shark destroyed their tackle, and the men returned to port raving about a 100-foot shark, refusing to go back to sea for several days. While Steed notes that the measurement was obviously impossible, he does go on to say that he was familiar with the fishermen for many years and that they were stolid men, not given to fish stories, nor even talking about their catches. Mr. Steed also notes that all the fishermen involved were experienced men well used to sighting whales and even great whites, yet the men were in a state of outright fear and panic upon returning to shore. This would not be the only sighting of a possible megalodon off the coasts of Australia, with the crew of a fishing vessel in the 1960s reporting their own encounter with a giant shark. Initially reluctant to speak about it for fear of being teased, they, along with their captain, admitted to seeing a gargantuan white shark swim past their 85-foot boat, claiming that it rivaled their own ship in size. All men involved were familiar with whales and steadfastly denied the creature being a whale, though most telling of all may possibly be the fact that this giant shark's skin so closely matched the ghostly white complexion of the 1918 sighting. Sightings of giant sharks have been reported across the Pacific and as far east as the Mexican coast. While fear of the water can certainly play tricks on the mind, before you dismiss any of these claims of Megalodon's existence, it's important to remember that only until recently did modern science accept the existence of squids large enough to eat men, and only 6 years ago was one finally caught on tape.
Complex life has existed on Earth for just over 500 million years, and in all that time, the planet has seen some terrifying, weird, and incredible animals. The Earth has been blessed with millions of years of animal diversity, and some of those animals have been big. We mean really, really big. Coming in at number 14, Titanoboa. Modern anacondas can reach some pretty incredible lengths, with the largest ever recorded reaching an astonishing 28 feet and weighing an estimated 500 pounds. Yet even that is only just barely half the size of the incredible Titanoboa, which, true to its name, reached a terrifying length of 50 feet and weighed in at 2,500 pounds. Titanoboa was a constrictor snake and would wrap its massive muscular coils around prey, squeezing with so much force that it could potentially induce a heart attack. Because of its incredible size, Titanoboa was almost certainly a water-dwelling snake, living in marshes and swamps full of water that could support its massive bulk. Number 13, Syrian camel. Modern camels stand about 7 feet in the hump and weigh up to 2,200 pounds. But 100,000 years ago, the Syrian camel would have towered over its modern-day counterparts at an astonishing 13 feet in height and weighing 5,480 pounds. Living 100,000 years ago, the Syrian camel was not thought to be domesticated by early man, but the discovery of stone tools that used camel foot bones likely meant that man actively hunted these giants. The Syrian camel mysteriously disappeared at around the same time as the other great Ice Age mammals, and though some scientists blame humans for hunting them into extinction, many are skeptical that a young humanity would have had the numbers necessary to kill off so many species at once. The discovery of iridium fragments in sedimentary layers around the world from around the extinction of the Ice Age megafauna hints at a possible asteroid impact for the extinction, but with humanity still tens of thousands of years away from inventing writing and historical records, we may never truly know the cause. Number 12. Sharks are the undisputed kings of the ocean, but millions of years ago, they were just another fish in the sea, for something far more terrifying than Jaws lurked in the depths. Reaching a length of up to 60 feet and weighing in at an incredible 100,000 pounds, the mosasaur ruled the oceans during the time of the dinosaurs. Despite its mass, mosasaurs were incredibly agile and employed double sets of flippers that exploited a quirk of fluid dynamics. By having the rear flippers stroke out of sync with the front flippers, they could catch the wake of the front flippers and provide extra bursts of speed. Hunting sharks, giant prehistoric fish, and even each other, mosasaurs were one of the most fearsome marine animals of all time, and a hunter so adept that it took global climate change to bring its reign to an end. Number 11. Leopleurodon. Ancestor to the mighty Mosasaurus, Leopleurodon was a fearsome apex predator, but ultimately no competition for Mosasaurus. What it lacked in sheer size though, it made up for in speed, being one of the fastest of the plesiosaurs and snacking on fish, squid, and smaller marine reptiles. It's thought Leopleurodon had an extremely well-developed sense of smell as well, akin to a shark, making it one of the most fearsome predators to ever swim the seas. Number 10. Sarcosuchus imperator. At over 20 feet long, a saltwater crocodile named Lolong is the largest officially recorded crocodile ever discovered. Yet Lolong would have been nothing more than a moderately sized meal for Sarcosuchus, which reached 40 feet and weighed 20,000 pounds. Because crocodiles are one of the few species of animals on Earth that never stop growing, it's actually not known if Super Croc, as Sarcosuchus is nicknamed, could grow even larger than this. Scientists, conducting tests on the growth rings of one Sarcosuchus's remains, discovered that the giant crocodile wasn't done growing yet, even though it was over 40 years old when it died. With modern saltwater crocs living for up to 70 years, it's quite possible that scientists have simply not discovered enough Sarcosuchus's remains to discover how truly monstrous these super crocs grew. Number 9. Paraceratherium. The African elephant is the largest mammal currently alive, standing at 11 feet and weighing 13,000 pounds. Yet an African elephant would have barely reached to the shoulders of Paraceratherium, which stood at a whopping 24 feet and weighed up to 44,000 pounds. Essentially a hornless rhinoceros that looked like a cross between a rhino and a dinosaur, Paraceratherium holds the record for the largest land mammal to have ever lived. With its long neck, it devoured leaves from the tallest trees, but needing to keep that massive bulk fueled, it's thought that as far as its turn to grasslands, Paraceratherium's fate was sealed and extinction was quick to come. Number 8. Whale shark. Terrifying early sailors with its iconic shark fin, the whale shark quickly proved to be nothing more than a gentle giant. The largest living fish in the world, whale sharks can grow up to 36 feet and weigh up to 41,000 pounds, though unofficial accounts say they can grow larger. Despite its incredible size, whale sharks actually feed on the tiniest animals in the ocean, plankton, and small fish that are accidentally swallowed by its huge mouth. With a calm and serene temperament, whale sharks are a favorite attraction for divers and have been known to even give some a ride by allowing them to cling to their fins. Just don't try doing that with a Mosasaurus. Number 7. Leadsichthys. Whale sharks are the largest fish alive today, but millions of years ago, Leadsichthys dwarfed modern whale sharks with a length of 55 feet and a weight of 43,000 pounds, officially making it the largest fish to have ever lived. Yet just like the whale shark, Leadsichthys was a filter feeder that cruised the world's oceans, mouth agape, and swallowing down mouthfuls of plankton, krill, and jellyfish. Had they been around today, and given their massive size, that might have accidentally included the occasional hapless diver. Number 6. Paleoloxodon pneumaticus. Dinosaurs are renowned for producing some of the largest beasts to ever walk or swim the earth, but mammals were quick to show that they too had what it took to grow really big. The king of elephants, Paleoloxodon, reached 16 feet at the shoulder and weighed in at 48,000 pounds. Due to a lack of discovered fossils, scientists are actually unsure about Paleoloxodon's true size, and some think it might have actually grown bigger than Paraceratherium, dethroning it as the largest land mammal to have ever lived. Whatever Paleoloxodon's true size, it's clear that mammals have proven they too can throw their weight around. Number 5. Shastasaurus. The largest animals to have ever existed often come from the depths of the ocean, and that's no accident. Due to massive bulk, these animals could only exist in water that helped support their massive weight, and few animals have ever approached the staggering dimensions of Shastasaurus. At an astonishing 68 feet in length and 80,000 pounds, Shastasaurus may have been the largest reptile to ever swim the ocean and grew as big as a modern-day sperm whale. Yet for all its size, the Shastasaurus likely also fed on small animals and plankton, given the fact that it had short, toothless jaws better suited for sucking in water and anything caught in it. Number 4. Megalodon. The largest great white shark ever officially measured was found off the coast of Cuba and was 21 feet long and weighed in at 7,328 pounds. Yet this modern-day monster wouldn't have reached even half the size of Megalodon. At a length of 52 feet and weighing up to 200,000 pounds, Megalodon would have made a snack out of a great white. And if you thought you were afraid to go into the water before, imagine going for a dip in an ocean patrolled by a giant that could fit an entire rhinoceros into its mouth. Its teeth reached up to 7 inches in length, and it's thought it preyed on literally anything smaller than itself, including other megalodons. Though it went extinct 1.6 million years ago, some scientists believe there is a possibility of a remnant population surviving somewhere in the deepest depths, and eyewitness testimony of sharks in excess of 40 feet may give these theories some credence. Number 3. Spinosaurus. No dinosaur is more famous or feared than the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, yet Spinosaurus would certainly have given any T-Rex a run for its money. The largest carnivorous dinosaur ever discovered, Spinosaurus was over 60 feet in length and weighed in at 200,000 pounds. Its head alone was the size of a tall human and filled with teeth up to 8 inches in length. Yet despite its massive size and formidable claws, Spinosaurus did not hunt other dinosaurs, as its teeth were hollow like a crocodile's and not serrated, thus not suitable for tearing into tough hides. Instead, Spinosaurus cruised the ancient swamps and marshes of prehistoric Earth, feasting on fish and scavenging other dinosaurs' kills. Number 2. Argentinosaurus. At last we reached the king of the land heavyweights, the mighty Argentinosaurus. At a length of up to 115 feet and weighing in at 100 tons, Argentinosaurus was for all intents and purposes predator-proof. However, with eggs that were the size of a coconut, it's clear that young Argentinosaurus had a lot of growing up to do, and scientists estimate that it took a whopping 40 years for an Argentinosaurus to reach full size. While the young may have been vulnerable to predators, we doubt there would have been many carnivores brave enough to face down the wrath of a herd of these titans. And finally, number 1, the blue whale. It can be easy to look at a history of the Earth's animals and wonder where all the giants went. Yet the modern-day blue whale is not just a giant, but the largest animal to have ever lived. With reports of blue whales over 100 feet in length and weighing 300,000 pounds, blue whales have never faced the risk of predation, until man came along. Fiercely hunted for their oil, blue whales nearly went extinct until global conservation programs and a ban on whaling started to see their numbers rebound. Sadly, where tens of thousands used to swim the world's oceans, it's thought that only a fraction of this number remain, and their future is still uncertain.
Animals will do anything to stay alive, but some go to extremes you can't even imagine. Some insects literally explode to help protect the colony, and some lizards push their own bones through their skin to create deadly weapons. You know all about venomous snakes, jellyfish, and spiders, but did you know there is a slow loris that covers its entire body with poison from its armpits? What other insane ways do animals protect themselves? Let's find out. We're going to start with some of the weirdest and deadliest defense mechanisms in the animal kingdom. Our first animal ejects a slimy, non-toxic substance from its body to deter predators. However, even though the slime itself isn't poisonous, it can be deadly for a different reason. Hagfish are the stuff nightmares are made of. They look like giant worms with 2 sets of razor-sharp teeth. If that doesn't give you the chills, I don't know what will. What makes this animal even more insane is that the teeth themselves aren't even the most deadly defensive weapon. Hagfish are considered living fossils because they've been around for around 300 million years, with very little evolutionary change. This is because the terrifying monster is super successful at surviving thanks to its weird traits. Hagfish mostly scavenge at the bottom of the ocean, but sometimes they find themselves under attack by predators. When this happens, the hagfish does something that can literally suffocate their attacker to death. Hagfish are capable of secreting a slimy substance out of their skin, but it's what this slime does after it's in the water that's incredible. As the hagfish fills the water around it with slime, the predator will inevitably get some into its gills. When the slime and water mix, the solution begins to expand. This means any slime that the attacker ingested will also expand, causing blockages of the attacker's breathing organs. If enough slime gets into the gills of an attacker, it can cause them to suffocate to death. And if you weren't scared before, think about this. If the animal attacking the hagfish dies by suffocation, its body will sink to the bottom of the ocean. At this point, the hagfish might swim up to it and begin tearing it apart with its razor-sharp teeth. The predator has now become the meal for the hagfish. Like we said, these animals are the stuff nightmares are made of. Some animals can produce deadly toxins, which can kill any predator trying to attack them. But what if a creature doesn't have venomous spit or poisonous skin? What if instead of shooting venom at its attacker, it shot them with their own organs? The sea cucumber actually does this when it's threatened or under attack. That's right, a sea cucumber's defense mechanism is to spill its guts, literally. You might think this would be deadly to the sea cucumber itself, as there are very few animals that would be able to survive if their internal organs ended up on the outside of their body. but this creature seems to be unfazed by it. Sea cucumbers don't move very fast. Their locomotion is controlled by either using their tiny tube feet to scurry along the ocean floor or to swim through the water by flexing their body. They can also just relax and let the ocean currents carry them from place to place. However, sea cucumbers will never be fast enough to outswim a predator, and although they have a small mouth and teeth, it's not enough to scare anything that wants to eat it away. So the sea cucumber has evolved an incredibly bizarre yet effective way to fight off and even kill its attacker. As a predator approaches, the sea cucumber ejects its intestines and other slime-covered organs out of its anus and toward the threat. The organs can then get wrapped around the attacker and caught in its gills. This not only incapacitates the animal trying to eat the sea cucumber, but can also cause it to suffocate to death. The internal organs also sometimes contain a poison called holothurin, which can also be deadly to the sea cucumber's attacker. The craziest part is that once the sea cucumber ejects its internal organs to defend itself, it will carry on as if nothing happened. The reason sea cucumbers don't die from this defense mechanism is that they are echinoderms. Echinoderms also consist of creatures like sea stars, sea urchins, and blastoids, which can all regenerate damaged or lost body parts. A good example of this is when a sea star loses one of its arms. It can regrow the entire appendage back. The sea cucumber uses this ability to regrow its internal organs after using its original set as a deadly net to deter or even kill a predator. The sea cucumber's defense mechanism is pretty insane, but there are a few animals that can top it. Instead of shooting out internal organs, some insects literally explode to protect their colony. The Malaysian exploding ant has a unique way of protecting the others in its group. If threatened, these ants will tear themselves apart by flexing their abdominal muscles. When this happens, their back end explodes, releasing a poisonous sticky fluid created by glands within the ant's body. This deadly substance sprays out all over the invader, causing it to get stuck as other ants tear it apart. Unfortunately for the Malaysian ant, this defense mechanism is deadly for both parties. The attacker gets covered in sticky substance, which incapacitates and slowly kills it as the toxins disrupt life functions. When the Malaysian exploding ant ruptures its abdomen, everything within its body comes out. The toxic substance is ejected onto the invader along with the ant's guts and innards. However, this is an extremely effective way of protecting the colony as a whole. Unfortunately, the bigger the invader, the more explosive ants need to be dispatched. This can lead to multiple kamikaze ants detonating all at once to stop the invader. However, this isn't a huge loss in the grand scheme of things, as the colony can be made up of millions of ants. There's another animal that also uses an exploding defense mechanism to protect its colony. The difference is they are much more efficient than the Malaysian exploding ants. There are termites found in French Guiana that blow themselves up to protect their colony. However, they seem to be a little more clever when sending termites into battle to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the masses. Most of the time, the older worker termites are sent on explosive defense missions. Over the lifetime of a termite worker, glands in the abdomen produce toxic crystals that are stored until the day a bombing mission is needed to save the colony. The older termites are less useful as workers but more deadly as suicide bombers, as they have accumulated more toxic crystals within their abdomens. When the colony is under attack, these older workers are sent to battle, where they mix chemicals from their salivary gland with the crystals. This causes a chemical reaction that results in a small explosion. The toxic substance then covers the invader and paralyzes them. At this point, the other termites can tear the invader apart, giving this termite species the ability to protect themselves from most attackers. Sticking with the insect kingdom, there's one animal that oozes one of the most deadly toxins out of its body as a way to kill anything trying to eat it. Motizia millipedes are pretty awesome for a couple reasons. Not only do they have a deadly defense mechanism, but they also glow in the dark. They do this using a process called bioluminescence, where chemicals within the body mix to allow them to glow. There are a couple of reasons why the Motizia millipede does this, but the main one is to serve as a warning to predators not to mess with them. The bioluminescence itself is not deadly to predators, but there is something else that the Motizia millipede releases that is. All along their body are pores that the millipede oozes cyanide from. Cyanide is incredibly toxic to almost every animal on the planet. Therefore, the bioluminescence serves as a warning to others that if they try to eat the Motizia millipede, they will likely die in the process. This would only take a single bite of the cyanide-covered millipede for a beetle or rodent to ingest a deadly dose of the chemical. Therefore, if a predator sees a millipede glowing in the dark, they know to stay as far away from it as possible. There is one animal that is super cute, but also super deadly. This next animal covers itself in poison that it secretes from its own armpits. The pygmy slow loris can be found in the rainforest of Vietnam and Laos. But don't let those big, cute eyes fool you. This animal has a deadly defense mechanism to keep predators from attacking it. Pythons and hawks hunt the pygmy slow loris. However, in order to make itself a less desirable and more deadly target for these animals, the pygmy slow loris secretes poison from its glands in their armpits. They will use their hands to rub this poison all over their body so that if a predator does try to eat them, they'll be poisoned in the process. This serves as a deterrent for predators. The pygmy slow loris lives up to his name as it's only 15 to 25 centimeters in length and is not very fast. But the poison it secretes sends any creature it ingests into anaphylactic shock, causing their airways to close up. The small animal does something even crazier with the poison from its armpits though. It will actually rub it onto their teeth, giving the animal a deadly bite as well. The bite of a pygmy slow loris that has rubbed poison on its teeth can rot flesh. This highly efficient defense mechanism makes this species of slow loris one of the most poisonous mammals on the planet. There are some reptiles that have some pretty unbelievable defense mechanisms. In fact, several species will actually break their own bones just to make themselves more deadly. It's both a gruesome and fascinating defense mechanism. The hairy frog doesn't have poison or venom, but when under attack it can create claws out of its own bones to fight back with. The hairy frog does not have any claws in normal circumstances, but if a predator tries to attack it, it will break its own finger bones and push them through its skin. This allows the hairy frog to use the sharp bone fragments as claws similar to Wolverine from the X-Men. Think about how crazy that is. The hairy frog literally breaks its own fingers and then pushes the sharp fragments of bone through its skin. This must be painful, but it's also highly effective at fighting off predators and can even be deadly in the right circumstances. If the hairy frog punctures its attacker in just the right spot, it could cause life-ending damage. Relatively little is known about this frog from Central Africa. In fact, scientists aren't even sure what happens to the bones or the frog after the threat is dealt with. It's hypothesized that when the frog relaxes, the bones slide back under the skin, but they probably don't heal for the rest of the frog's life. Whatever happens, this might be one of the most badass defense mechanisms in the animal kingdom. This next animal has a similar ability to the hairy frog, but its bones are poisonous, and it's not the finger bones that get broken. The Iberian ribbed newt, also called the Spanish ribbed newt, has a crazy way to defend itself from predators. The ribbed newt will push its ribs through its skin to create poisonous spiked barbs while under threat. This is not only intimidating, but can be deadly as well. The Iberian ribbed newt pushes its ribs out of its body by bending at an angle and thrusting its rib cage up through its back. This sounds incredibly painful, but it is highly effective for fending off predators. What makes this maneuver so deadly is that the pointy ribs can puncture the mouth of whatever creature is trying to eat the newt. The ribs themselves are not poisonous, but as the newt pushes them through their body, glands in the skin cover the bones in poison. Once the predator bites down on the newly formed spikes, the poison can be injected into the body. Researchers have found that it doesn't seem to hurt when the Iberian ribbed newt uses this defensive strategy. This seems unbelievable, but when scientists have observed the process in the wild, the newt appears to walk away from the altercation unharmed. It would appear that the newt just needs to readjust its body to move the ribs back into the correct position, and the punctures in the skin will heal over time. This highly effective defense mechanism is not only deadly to the predator in some instances, but can also be done repeatedly if the newt is attacked multiple times during its life. One animal takes a very different and unique approach to killing its attackers. Instead of producing its own poison, it eats deadly plants and uses the toxic compounds in them to keep predators away. Nightshade is a deadly plant for many insects, animals, and even humans. The potato beetle, on the other hand, is able to handle the poisonous compounds in the plant and use them to its advantage. When this insect eats nightshade, it takes in the nutrients it needs and then converts everything else into waste. The waste we're talking about here is poop. The crazy part is that the potato beetle does something really strange with its fecal matter. After the nightshade is digested, its toxins are trapped in the potato beetle's poop. Using its abdominal muscles, the potato beetle covers itself in its own toxic feces. This is called a fecal shield and is an excellent way to keep predators from eating the beetle. If a predator does decide to take a bite out of the poop-covered potato beetle, it won't live long enough to regret it, as the chemicals from the nightshade will likely kill them within seconds. If you're feeling a little queasy after that last form of defense, you'll want to prepare yourself for the way fulmars protect themselves. Their defense against predators is even more gross than the potato beetle covering itself in poop. Fulmars are seabirds that look similar to seagulls. They are relatively small compared to other birds, making them a target for hungry predators. However, fulmars have developed a unique and very gross way to defend themselves. If threatened, the fulmar will vomit all over their attacker. This is obviously nasty, but there is something much more sinister about the vomit than it just being gross. When the fulmar vomits on a predator, a special oil from their stomach gets mixed into the concoction. Normally, the fulmar is just aiming for the face of the attacker, which is enough to deter it as the stomach acid likely stings the eyes and smells incredibly unpleasant. However, researchers have recorded the vomit getting onto the feathers of predatory birds and causing them to mat. When this happens, it can cause the other birds to lose its ability to fly. The defense mechanism of vomiting on an attacker likely wasn't meant to be deadly. Instead, it was just a way for the fulmar to buy itself enough time to get away. But if the attacker is unlucky enough to get the vomit all over their feathers and lose the ability to fly, they wouldn't be able to hunt, and therefore will either be an easy target for another predator or starve to death. Let's now talk about the defense mechanism you're likely familiar with: venom. However, the most venomous animal on the planet is likely not what you think. The most venomous animal on the planet is not a snake, spider, or scorpion. It's actually a snail, the marble-coned snail to be exact. This unassuming mollusk is only 3 to 15 centimeters long, yet it contains enough venom to kill over 20 humans. The defense mechanism is used to not only protect the snail from being eaten by predators, but also to incapacitate its prey. Their prey consists of marine worms, small fish, and even other snails. Since the marble-coned snail can't move very fast, it injects its venom into a nearby animal via a barb that acts like a spear gun. The marble-coned snail patiently waits for an unsuspecting victim to pass by. When another animal is in range, the snail shoots out its poisonous barb like a dart. The barb can reach speeds of 400 miles an hour, which means anything within striking distance is pretty much dead. And if a predator even thinks about attacking the marble-coned snail, it will be the last thing they ever do. Once the marble-coned snail feels threatened, it will attack anything close by with its deadly venom-covered barb. The ocean is a dangerous place. It's even more true when you consider the marble-coned snail is not the only highly venomous creature that lives in its waters. The box jellyfish is another deadly sea creature that uses venom to protect itself from attackers. However, this jellyfish can sometimes kill other animals by accident due to its powerful toxins. Although the marble-coned snail has the most deadly venom, the box jelly is responsible for many more human deaths. Since the 1950s, over 5,500 people have died as a result of the jellyfish stings, but the box jelly's venom evolved to be used for protection and to capture prey, not to kill humans. The sea creature is so deadly because the toxins in the venom shut down the nervous system of any creature that is stung. This is an excellent defense against things that are trying to eat it, but since box jellies don't have much control over their tentacles, this can be deadly for anyone or anything that's just passing by. There's another sea creature with a similar capability as the box jelly, except this animal is highly intelligent. The blue-ringed octopus is about the size of a golf ball. But like with the marble-coned snail, it's clear size doesn't matter when you have deadly venom. The venom of this octopus is enough to kill a human in just a few minutes. And the scariest part is there is no antitoxin. The blue-ringed octopus uses its deadly venom to protect itself from any animal that might want to eat it. In fact, the blue-ringed octopus's bite isn't even supposed to be painful. But that doesn't matter because the venom is so strong that it begins to shut down the nervous system almost instantly. Any creature that makes the mistake of going after this octopus will likely be dead within minutes. Its muscles will stop working, eventually causing the heart to shut down and the predator to sink to the bottom of the ocean to await death. Now, don't get us wrong, there are definitely snakes and scorpions that have ridiculously deadly venom that they use to defend themselves. For example, the world's largest venomous snake can kill pretty much any attacker in under 15 minutes. The king cobra can grow up to 18.5 feet long, making it the longest venomous snake in the world. The scientific name of the king cobra is Opiopegus hanna. Opiopegus means snake eater, which is an apt name for the king cobra as one of its main sources of food is other snakes. The primary predator of the king cobra is the mongoose, which is resistant to the venom. But to protect itself from other predators like birds of prey, the king cobra can deliver a deadly amount of venom to keep them at bay. This snake's venom is so deadly that if it bites a full-grown elephant on the trunk, the elephant can succumb to the toxins and die within 3 hours. That is a huge animal that can be taken down by just one bite from a king cobra. This next animal has a deadly sting, but its name might be the most terrifying thing about it. The Death Stalker scorpion packs a huge punch that any animal brave enough to get close to will feel. Its stinger contains a deadly neurotoxin that can incapacitate any animal it comes in contact with. The venom the Death Stalker creates causes numbness and swelling, but can also cause the heart to shut down, killing its attacker. The venom is so potent that it can actually put a human into a coma and cause massive convulsions. So don't let the size of this scorpion fool you. Its venom is deadly, and it isn't afraid to use it to defend itself. This next animal might have the most unique defense mechanism out of any animal in the entire world. The boxer crab lives up to its name as it does something absolutely crazy with its claws. Yeah, this crab uses its claws to punch away attackers, but they take this defensive maneuver to another level. The boxer crab creates a symbiotic relationship with sea anemones and uses them as boxing gloves. The symbiotic relationship is incredible, since the sea anemones are covered in stinging cells and most fish and other sea creatures steer clear. They serve as highly effective weapons for the boxing crab. By using the anemones as boxing gloves, the crab can increase the effectiveness of each punch. To be fair, a sea anemone's sting is normally not deadly, but a well-placed punch to a fish gills or face would definitely be enough to deter the predator from eating the boxer crab. This relationship also benefits the sea anemone. By being connected to the boxer crab's claws, it gets carried from place to place, so it can reproduce and find new sources of food. Sea anemones are stuck in one spot unless their spores get carried onto the current to a new destination. However, once an anemone starts growing on coral or a rock, it cannot move. This problem is overcome by hitching a ride on the claws of a boxer crab. This allows the sea anemone to move around with its new companion to areas rich in nutrients. Also, the relationship allows the anemone to bud and reproduce in different areas based on where the boxer crab travels. This is a unique relationship based around working together more than causing death and destruction. But a precision strike with an anemone-covered claw by a boxer crab could end up being fatal to anything trying to attack the dynamic duo. If you thought the boxer crab and sea anemone were unique, there's another animal that has the ability to make its own antifreeze to protect itself from the cold. Obviously, ingesting antifreeze is not a good idea as it's a toxic substance, but the wood frog actually creates its own antifreeze in its body. This keeps the frog from freezing to death in frigid temperatures. It does this by secreting water out of its internal organs, which results in the frog being covered in ice. Then urea and glucose accumulate in the body, which acts as a natural antifreeze to keep the cells alive while the outside world is freezing. Although this would not necessarily make the wood frog poisonous like the antifreeze that we use in radiators of cars, it would still be a nasty meal with all that built-up urine in the body. Depending on how many antifreeze-filled wood frogs a predator eats, they might consume enough urea to cause a harmful buildup of the chemical in their body. Theoretically, if the animal didn't excrete the urea before it reached toxic levels, the natural antifreeze the frogs produce to stay alive could be deadly to whatever animal consumed it. On April 7, 1935, Kootenai aquarium owner Bert Hobson thought he struck gold when he and his son Ron caught a 14-foot-long, 1-ton tiger shark. With its profits dwindling thanks to the Great Depression, Hobson thought this deadly sea creature would turn the tide for the struggling aquarium, especially in the midst of a spate of shark attacks in Australia. So he put the shark on display. 8 days later, as families wandered around the shark tank around 5 p.m., the tiger shark started to convulse. In front of a huge audience, it vomited a rat, a bird, and eventually a human arm. The shark was killed and the rest of its stomach searched, but no other human remains or parts were found. The arm would eventually be identified as belonging to former boxer and current saloon keeper Jim Smith. But was this a shark attack? Or had Smith been brutally murdered and thrown into the ocean, where the shark had found his severed arm and mistaken it for a lunch? If so, by who? Born in England, Jimmy Smith had moved to the Balmain suburb of Sydney, where he lived for many years with his wife and child. At the time of his disappearance, he was 40 years old. Smith managed a billiard saloon that attracted a shady cast of characters. It's perhaps here where he met a man that would change the course of his life, a criminal boss named Reginald Holmes. To all outward appearances, Holmes appeared to be a respectable member of the community. He was happily married, a member of his local Presbyterian church and the Royal Sydney Yacht Club, and father to 2 children. In his professional life, Holmes followed in his family's footsteps by running his own boat-building business. However, at some point he realized he could use his boats to make more and less legal money. Realizing there was a higher demand for drugs than boats, Holmes hired men to take speedboats out into the water and collect packages of smuggled illegal goods he arranged to have thrown overboard from incoming ships. A man of many criminal skills, Holmes also dabbled in other shady ventures like insurance scams and check forgery. Jim Smith began working as a builder for Holmes in the early 1930s, where he initially helped Holmes with small crimes like scamming other builders out of supplies. Eventually, he moved into Holmes's smuggling operations and was even put in charge of Holmes's prized boat, the Pathfinder. Because crime apparently requires a good division of labor, Smith brought in one of his old pals, Patrick Brady, to help out with some check forgery scams. Brady would forge checks from Holmes's rich clients to steal their money. Things were going well until an incident with the Pathfinder boat. Holmes overinsured the boat and sent Smith out to sink it, but accidentally reported the sinking as suspicious to the police. The insurance fell through and led to Smith blackmailing Holmes. On April 7th, Smith and Brady met up for a night of drinking at the Cecil Hotel. This was the last time Smith would be seen alive out in public. Brady then took Smith to a small nearby cottage he owned at the beach community of Cronulla. A cab driver remembers encountering Brady later that night. He says he drove a terrified Brady from his cabin near Cronulla to Holmes' house that night. The driver also noted that Brady was hiding something under his jacket, although he probably didn't guess it was someone else's arm. Smith's wife Gladys became concerned after her husband failed to reappear from the fishing trip he told her he was on, and reported him missing. A mysterious man called her sometime later and told her that Jim would return in 3 days' time. Since Jim's arm was coughed up by a shark a few days later, that turned out to be a lie. When the arm was found, it was easily identifiable as Jim's because it had a large tattoo of two boxers fighting inside the forearm and a unique tattoo of Smith's. Fingerprint analysis confirmed that the arm belonged to Smith. When the authorities determined that the arm had been cut off rather than chewed, they realized that this was not a Jaws prequel, but murder. Additionally, the arm had some rope attached to its wrist. As sharks are not known to tie up their victims before killing them, this made police reasonably sure that they were looking at a homicide. While looking for a possible killer, authorities uncovered Smith's connection to both crime boss Holmes and forger Brady. They arrested Brady and took him in for questioning, but after 6 hours of interrogation, Brady still refused to admit any involvement in Smith's death. Eventually, Brady agreed to speak to the police and immediately pointed the finger toward Holmes, stating that he ordered Smith's murder. Holmes was questioned about this but denied even knowing Brady. A few days later, with police still trying to determine what had happened to Smith based off a shark saliva-covered arm, things took an even stranger turn. Holmes took one of his speedboats out on a ride on Sydney Harbor. With him, he had a bottle of brandy and a pistol. Unsurprisingly, he got drunk. Surprisingly, he shot himself in the head. Even more surprisingly, he survived a direct gunshot wound to his head and kept driving the boat. As you can imagine, navigating a boat with a hole in his head proved to be difficult for Holmes. His boat driving was so risky and erratic that he almost hit another boat out on the harbor. The driver of the second boat called the police and told them to be on the lookout for Holmes. When asked how they'd identify Holmes and his boat, the witness reportedly told police, "You won't mistake him, he has a bullet hole in his forehead." Since relatively few captains speed around Sydney Harbor with air whooshing through their skulls, police found Holmes fairly quickly. However, the crime boss appeared to have little intention of surrendering. After shooting himself in the head and surviving, maybe Holmes imagined himself to be completely invincible. It's also possible his decision-making skills weren't great after his blood loss and the still open bullet hole in his brain. Police had to chase him for 4 hours before catching up to him. Holmes, now either completely delusional or just lying, said that someone else had shot him and that he hadn't stopped for the police because he thought they were the people that had tried to kill him. Holmes went on to make a weird semi-confession to the police, reportedly saying, "Jimmy Smith is dead and there's only another left. If you leave me until tonight, I'll finish him." Since the police weren't keen on letting a bleeding man wander around Sydney until he found another victim to murder, they arrested him. After a few weeks back in the hospital, where they patched up his head, Holmes pointed the finger for Smith's murder back at Brady. He told authorities that Brady had murdered Smith and blackmailed Holmes for 500 Australian pounds, showing up to Holmes' house with a severed arm and threatening to pin Smith's murder on him. Holmes went on to say that Brady cut up Smith's body, put the pieces in a trunk, and threw the trunk into Gunnamatta Bay. Even though this may seem like an excessively cruel and brutal way of disposing of a body, it was quite a common practice in Sydney in the 1920s and 30s. It was so common, in fact, that it had a nickname, the Sydney Send-Off, which goes to show you that the good old days were rarely that good. People just look at the past through rose-colored glasses and forget about all the body dismemberment that happened. Holmes told police he paid Brady off, after which Brady naturally left the arm with him and Holmes decided to throw it in the ocean. Authorities pressured Holmes to testify against Brady at the inquest on June 12th. This was made difficult by the fact that on the morning of June 12th, Holmes was discovered in his Nash sedan with 3 bullet holes in the chest. As Holmes' chest apparently had less internal Kevlar than his head, he was now officially dead. Though Brady's trial continued without Holmes' testimony, there was no solid evidence to pin him as the murderer. Brady's lawyer also pointed out that with no body and just an arm, no one could even be certain that Smith was dead. Brady was eventually released, though most of Sydney believed him to be guilty anyway, making him the O.J. Simpson of Sydney. Which leaves us with a few interesting and contradicting theories as to what could have happened to Smith. The most likely and obvious theory is that Holmes, who was running a huge criminal enterprise and was supposedly being blackmailed by Smith, ordered Brady to kill him to get him out of the way. However, there are a few problems with this concept. If the killing was done at Holmes' request and Brady was just a hired hand and underling, who killed Holmes while Brady was in prison awaiting trial? Why did Holmes withdraw 500 Australian pounds right before he drove out of his house and was killed? Did he lie about paying off Brady and was going to pay him off then? Or was he paying off someone else? If Brady had someone else murder Holmes, a feared criminal under his orders, perhaps he occupied a higher position in the criminal food chain than the authorities thought. This made it possible that Brady was the one who orchestrated Smith's murder as well. However, there's an alternate theory about Holmes' death that lets Brady off the hook. Before he was shot, Holmes had taken out a generous life insurance policy that would benefit his wife and children. As his name was being dragged through the mud during Smith's murder investigation and Brady's criminal trial, it's possible that Holmes, keen on saving his family further embarrassment, ensuring their future, and not seeing a clear way out of his troubles, arranged for his own death. Professor Alex Castles, who has extensively studied the case, believes that Holmes hired a hitman to kill himself. So what if Brady killed Smith without being ordered to by Holmes? There are a few problems with this theory as well. First of all, Brady was only 5 foot 4 inches tall. It would have been hard for him to take down Smith unless, of course, Smith was really drunk and unable to fight. Also, why was Brady so scared in the cab ride leaving his cabin? And why did he go straight to Holmes' house after the murder to blackmail his dangerous crime boss? The most unusual but not so far-fetched theory is that Jim Smith wasn't even dead. The only part of Smith that was found, after all, was his severed arm from the elbow down. It's a strange coincidence that the only limb found was one that featured a unique identifying tattoo, which would immediately tie the arm to Smith. Perhaps Smith had realized that he was in too deep with Holmes' criminal activity and wanted a way out. Either by himself or with the help of his wife, he could have severed his arm at the elbow and thrown it into the ocean. That way, when it was discovered, he would be presumed dead by Holmes' criminal ring, who would then leave him alone. Even though the arm was also confirmed to be Smith's via fingerprinting technology, so in theory, Smith could have just cut off a finger or two and still been ID'd. This technology was relatively new at the time and not commonly known. Since there weren't 7 versions of CSI floating around making everyone an amateur forensic specialist, Smith may not have known that he could even be identified via fingerprints, and thus wanted to make sure his whole forearm, tattoo included, was found. However, this theory has a couple of holes too. First and foremost, if Holmes wanted the arm found so he could be presumed dead, why would he throw it into the ocean? It would make more sense to leave the arm somewhere conspicuous, where it would be found almost immediately, rather than hoping a shark would get hungry, find it, and chew it up. Then again, perhaps Smith had left his arm somewhere more conspicuous, and then it was thrown into the ocean, either accidentally or by a passerby who found it and didn't want to report it or deal with it. Years later, it was discovered that Smith had been working as a fizz gig. This was not a failed soda brand, but Australian slang of the time for a police informant. Strangely, this information could still support multiple theories of Smith's death. If Holmes or Brady discovered that Smith was leaking information about their illegal activity to the police, it gave both men the reason to want Smith dead. However, if Smith saw himself working as a double agent and was dealing with increased stress from two-timing his friend and boss while also collaborating with the police, he may have thought disappearing by faking his own death was the only way out. Being called a fizz gig could only add to that stress. However, this new evidence of Smith's role as an informant also added another suspect in Smith's possible murder, Eddie Wayman. At the time, Wayman was one of the most dangerous and infamous bank robbers in Australia. Smith had leaked some information to the police that led to them catching Wayman and his partner in a bank robbery in progress. So, did Wayman break into Brady's cabin that night and kill Smith? If Brady was truly the amateur criminal it appears he was, Wayman could have threatened him into silence and told him to bring Smith's arm to Holmes' house to show the crime boss that Wayman meant business. After all, if Wayman knew Smith had ratted him out, he could have easily believed it was done on Holmes' order. And that would also make Wayman a good suspect for Holmes' later murder as well, and could explain both why Brady seemed so terrified after leaving the murder scene and why Holmes tried to run away and kill himself. To his dying day, Brady continued to deny that he had any involvement in his old friend Smith's murder. Whatever may have really happened to Jimmy Smith, the most interesting thing to note is that in this mystery, a shark probably ended up saving lives. If the tiger shark in Kooky Aquarium hadn't thrown up Smith's arm, it's unlikely that Holmes's criminal empire would have come crumbling down so soon. That means it's possible many others would have been murdered thanks to Holmes's scams and drug smuggling if it wasn't for one shark's upset stomach. What we can all agree on is that no matter what, that tiger shark did not deserve to die. A shark getting food poisoning from a nasty human arm and then being killed after it throws the arm up is a horrible way to go. We here at Infographics demand justice for the Kooky tiger shark. Have you ever thought about sailing the open sea alone? Would you ever want to? For many of us, it might sound like fun, exciting, or simply relaxing to take some time away from our day-to-day lives, like enjoying a nice vacation. Perhaps picturing yourself on a boat with beautiful sunshine and salty sea air is appealing to you. Either that or maybe just the idea makes you seasick. Whatever your case may be, most of us can probably agree that sailing is one thing, but being stranded out in the open ocean alone is far less than ideal. Should anything like this happen to you, your chances of survival are slim. No one knows this better than a man who has experienced it firsthand. In 1981, after enduring a divorce from his wife, Stephen Callahan was driven by ambition and an adventurous spirit. He decided that he wanted to sail the treacherous Atlantic Ocean in his 21-foot boat called the Napoleon Solo, a fitting name given his desire to undertake the voyage entirely by himself. At first, his trip was going smoothly. He began his long journey from Newport, Rhode Island, first sailing to Bermuda. From there, he set sail to England. He continued onward, eventually making his way to the Caribbean island of Antigua. From there, his boat suffered heavy damage from some bad weather. Luckily though, he managed to make the necessary repairs and move forward with his grand trip. He persisted on through Spain and Portugal, coming out near Madeira in the Canary Islands. It was when he departed the Canary Islands on his way back to Antigua when disaster struck. In January 1982, just a week after his departure, the Napoleon Solo was stricken, presumably by a whale. This caused severe damage and Callahan was forced to abandon his boat. With no time to think, he frantically prepared his lifeboat while simultaneously trying to gather as many supplies as he could. He had to dive repeatedly back into his sinking boat to retrieve vital items for survival. This was made all the more difficult considering that he couldn't see anything while under the water and had to navigate his boat by memory. He had no choice but to locate items by feeling around for them. Imagine for a moment having to race against the clock to pack whatever you can for survival, knowing full well that what you choose to grab could mean the difference between life and death. Now also imagine that you're forced to do this while blindfolded. Anyone would probably feel the need to panic in this scenario. Your adrenaline would surely be pumping, your heart racing out of your chest. Yet if you want to survive, you don't have time to give in to trepidation. That's probably how Callahan felt during his moment of sheer crisis. In his haste, Callahan managed to procure a fishing line, water purifier, and a spear gun. For food, he gathered mostly scraps like peanuts and raisins, eggs, cabbage, corned beef, baked beans, and 8 ounces of water. With what he was able to grab, however, his supplies would only last him about 2.5 weeks. From then on, he was without much of anything. 800 miles west of the Canaries, completely isolated and adrift on a raft in the middle of the open ocean. Surely, he should have been doomed by this point. He had only his wits to rely upon. With very few resources available to him, he had to develop a means to survive. He mostly fished and occasionally hunted for birds. He had no way to cook his food, however, so he had to eat everything raw. Consider that the next time you feel the need to complain about your food being overcooked. For Callahan, during his desperate time, overcooked meals would have been a luxury. Though he had grabbed a water purifier, it turned out to be ineffective at converting seawater, so he had to rig a system of balloons and tarps to catch rainwater. With this, he was only able to secure about 20 ounces of water per day, but this was just barely enough to keep him alive. Callahan was forced to revert to old-fashioned navigational techniques, creating a sextant out of pencils. A sextant is a device used to measure the horizon and celestial objects like stars and planets. He used this tool in order to roughly estimate where he was and where to steer his raft. He used the North Star as his guide to aim his raft toward the West Indies, hoping to run into help along the way. After so many weeks adrift at sea, Callahan's raft became its own miniature ecosystem. A colony of barnacles began to grow on the bottom of it, which attracted fish that he would then catch and eat. Unfortunately, these fish also attracted sharks that would continuously circle his raft. They served as a constant reminder of the dangerous situation he was in. One might presume that one of the sharks would have grown impatient and taken a bite out of Callahan's raft to deflate it. But no, it was actually a fish that almost sank him. While he was fishing one day, his catch ripped a hole through the bottom of his raft. Callahan had to perform rushed repairs with his arms under the water and an encompassing circle of sharks surrounding him. Keeping his boat afloat while simultaneously trying to repair it was a full-time job. It must have been exhausting. Throughout the entirety of his ordeal, around 7 ships passed within his vicinity. 2 of them were less than a mile away. Callahan desperately tried to signal them using a flare gun and emergency radio beacon to gain their attention. But his attempts ended in failure. He felt utterly helpless and became increasingly depressed. Though his raft was rated a 6-man inflatable, it still felt cramped after a while. On top of everything, he endured fierce storms, battled huge waves, and fought against extreme loneliness. With each passing day, his chances of survival were also growing more and more bleak. On the morning of his 76th day adrift, a group of fishermen spotted him just off the southeastern coast of Guadalupe. Finally, he was rescued. By this point, though, Callahan had lost 40 pounds and was covered in painful open sores from his constant exposure to the sun and seawater. One might think that after enduring all this, Callahan would have succumbed to post-traumatic stress disorder and wished to remain silent on his frightening experience, but this was not the case. Callahan recounted his days at sea in his book, Adrift: 76 Days Lost at Sea, which was on the New York Times bestseller list in 1986 for more than 36 weeks. His memoir was also used in the television documentary series I Shouldn't Be Alive, which aired on November 17, 2010, about 29 years after he was rescued in the Caribbean. His ordeal made him somewhat of an expert on ocean survival, and so he was contacted to act as an advisor for the 2012 film Life of Pi, which, if you don't already know, is about a young boy trapped on a raft in the middle of the ocean with a tiger. Callahan made props for the film, including lures and other tools seen in the movie. He mentioned that the film was so realistic that he found it difficult to watch. Thankfully, though, Callahan didn't have to deal with the added threat of a tiger on top of everything else he endured during his experience. After recovering from his living nightmare at sea, Callahan also decided to use the knowledge of what he had learned to help develop a design for an improved life raft. He called the design the Clam and created it as a utility raft equipped with a canopy to shield from prolonged exposure to the sun, as well as to use for collecting rainwater. He did this so that if others somehow wound up in the same dangerous situation, they'd at least have an easier time through the ordeal than he did. As an author, naval architect, inventor, and sailor, Stephen Callahan is an interesting person to say the least. With everything set against him on his 76-day venture alone at sea, he survived using his ingenuity and determination. As humans, we often like to think of ourselves as the top of the food chain. However, this has not always been the case, and even today that's not necessarily true in some environments. We're going to look at 13 of the most dangerous animals in history and how they shaped human evolution. You're about to go on a journey through jungles with cats the size of small cars and lagoons full of crocodiles with jaws that could swallow you whole. The saying goes, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my! But these creatures are nothing compared to the animals we have on this list. The first few animals will come as little surprise to you, but you have no idea what's in store after that. We'll be starting with leopards as number 13 on our list. Remember that the human species evolved in Africa between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago, while our early ancestors lived in Africa millions of years before that. This means that some of the animals in Africa evolved to hunt and eat early humans. That's why many of the most dangerous animals in history can be found in Africa. What makes leopards so dangerous to humans is their abilities to climb trees. In early human history, our ancestors climbed trees to get away from predators. Unfortunately, in the case of the leopard, the predator followed them right up said tree. For early humans, there was no place to hide from these stealthy cats. Another advantage the leopard had over humans was its speed and ability to carry a lot of weight in its jaws. Hunting and eating humans was not a problem for leopards. Even if we scurried up the tree, it could follow us, kill us, and easily carry our body back down the tree to be eaten. Or if the leopard was feeling particularly lazy, it'd just eat the human up in the tree. When we look at leopards' eating habits today, one study attributed 70% of all baboon deaths to African leopards. In terms of early human evolution, we were not all that different from baboons, which probably indicates the leopards were just as skilled at killing us as baboons. For our next animal, you might not be surprised, but you will probably feel a little betrayed. Our 12th most dangerous animal in history is the wolf. The creatures that we domesticated to be our friends were incredibly efficient at tracking and killing humans in the past. Although uncommon, there are still people attacked by wolves even today. When it's cold and food is scarce, we can make a delicious snack for these four-legged hunters. One of the reasons wolves were and still are so dangerous to humans is because of their hunting methods. Their ability to track their prey long distances allows them to find even the smartest human. They hunt in packs, so in the past, if a human was caught out in the forest alone, they may have quickly found themselves completely surrounded by a hungry group of wolves. At that point, there'd be literally nothing the human could do other than accepting their fate as the next meal for the hungry pack. It's true that our most lovable dogs today were domesticated from wolves. Even the Chihuahua and Bulldog were once a ferocious human-eating animal. Granted, in the past they were built like the deadly intelligent wolves we see today. It wasn't until humans started using tools and fire that we were able to calm the wild beast within the wolf and make them our best friends. If you have ophidiophobia, it's most likely because of how dangerous our 11th animal is. Ophidiophobia, or the fear of snakes, is practically ingrained in our DNA. This shouldn't come as a surprise, since in the past as today, snakes were one of the most dangerous animals to humans. Not long ago, one rattlesnake bite or even the venom of a cobra would lead to death. There was no antivenom or hospitals in early human history, and if humans stepped on a poisonous snake, that was pretty much it. They would die. However, now we're finding that the venomous snakes were not the only dangerous serpents. If you've ever seen the movie Anaconda, you know what we're talking about. If not, we highly recommend you go watch Jennifer Lopez and Ice Cube battle these constrictors deep in the Amazon jungle. It's possible that constrictors may have been just as dangerous to humans as venomous snakes, and if not as dangerous, definitely as scary. Anthropologists who study the indigenous peoples of the Amazon today have uncovered evidence that suggests one of the most common causes of death in those populations might be by constrictor snakes. Let's not forget that in the past, humans were on average shorter than the human population today. Constricting snakes, on the other hand, were larger than their current descendants. This size shift in the past did not bode well for our ancestors. Whether you're afraid of snakes or not, they most certainly were one of the most dangerous animals in human history. Speaking of being afraid of deadly animals, our next one will certainly make you wish you had a bigger boat. Our 10th most deadly animal is the shark. These cartilaginous eating machines are the stuff of nightmares. Sharks have not evolved much over the millennium, because if you're the most badass killing machine in the ocean, there's really no reason to evolve. Between their razor-sharp teeth, powerful jaws, and incredible speed, any human found in the water with one of these animals has slim to no chance of making it out alive. The largest and scariest shark in human history is the great white. On average, these sharks are 14 feet long but can reach over 20 feet. They have up to 300 serrated teeth that can easily cut through any part of the human body. Earlier in our history, we did not have the watercraft of today. Humans began with dugout canoes or smaller boats made of wood. The crafts could have easily been tipped over by the powerful great whites, making humans a great snack. However, the great white might not have been the most deadly shark in human history. That distinction could go to the bull shark. Although they're not quite as large as great whites, bull sharks can get well over 10 feet long and are more than capable of eating a human. One trait that makes bull sharks particularly dangerous is that they can swim in both salt and fresh water. Almost all sharks are restricted to the ocean, so they have to wait until humans come to them, but not bull sharks. They can swim up tributaries and into the fresh water that humans use as a drinking source earlier in history. Imagine going to get a drink of water and all of a sudden a bull shark lurches out of the water at you. You might as well just gather your stuff and move as far from water as possible at that point. The 9th most dangerous animal on our list is the hippopotamus. That's right, the animal that dances around wearing a tutu in Fantasia is incredibly dangerous to humans. Even today, it's estimated that hippos kill around 500 people a year in Africa. That is, in the present day. In the past, humans had to live much closer to the water sources hippos dwell in, and without the luxury of modern housing structures we have today. This means hippos and humans came into contact much more frequently in the past, leading to more altercations between them. The hippo would always win. Hippopotami do not eat humans. The reason they're so dangerous is because they're territorial and aggressive. They have incredibly sharp teeth and powerful jaws. Hippos of the past and today do not want to eat humans, they just want them out of their area, so they're happy to chase them away. The problem is, hippos are faster than you'd expect, and when a human finds themselves under the weight of a 3,000-pound hippo, they normally don't make it out alive. We're now at the end of the more obvious culprits for the most dangerous animals in history. From here on, you might find yourself surprised, especially because our next animal is a dragon. The Komodo dragon is the 8th most dangerous animal on our list. Obviously, the Komodo dragon is not a fire-breathing flying reptile from the stuff of legends, but it is incredibly dangerous to anybody that comes across one. These dragons weigh up to 300 pounds and can easily outrun a human on open terrain. Their jaws are filled with pointed teeth that make quick work of flesh and bones, but it's not just the teeth that makes their bite so dangerous. If a human comes across a hungry Komodo and gets bit, the dragon will inject venom into them. Then, if the human makes it out of the death grip of the Komodo dragon's jaws, the venom will slowly paralyze them until they can't move and the Komodo can finish the job. In human history, if someone found themselves face to face with a Komodo dragon, they would have to hope their fight or flight response would immediately tell them to run for their life. Unfortunately for early humans, running would not help them escape from our next animal because it can fly. The seventh most dangerous animal in history is the eagle. The same type of bird that's the emblem of freedom for the United States may have been one of the most dangerous animals in human history. Eagles are particularly dangerous to human children because of their smaller size. Early human skulls have been uncovered in South Africa that were clearly associated with an eagle killing. Such skulls have been found near eagle nests with holes punched into the eye sockets by the bird's talons. Early humans didn't just need to keep a close watch on the ground and horizon, but in the skies as well. Even today, we see that in some parts of Africa, primates make up around 90% of eagle diets. It wasn't that long ago in human history where we'd not have had the ability to protect our young from hungry eagles swooping down from overhead. And if you thought eagles being on our list of most dangerous animals in history was crazy, you won't believe this next animal. Our sixth most deadly animal is actually other primates. Our most closely related ancestors in the animal kingdom may have been some of our most dangerous predators. We like to think of ourselves as evolved far beyond all other animals on the planet, but we share about 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees. Like humans, other primates eat meat. Sometimes, if early humans crossed paths with other primates, a battle for survival would ensue. Primates do not seem to care how closely related they are to other species if they can eat them. Today, we see chimps in Uganda eat colobus monkeys. Both are primates, but the chimps don't care. There's no reason to suspect that if a troop of chimps came across a human early in our history and they were hungry enough, the chimps would not attack and eat the human. This behavior of primate-on-primate predation is not uncommon. We see it in orangutans and other primates as well. Now we're going to get into some of the most dangerous animals that you may have never heard of. Our fifth most dangerous animals are hyenas. However, not the ones you're familiar with. There have been as many as 100 different hyena species living at the same time as humans. One species in particular was exceptionally deadly. This hyena was called Pachycrocruta. It was the size of a lion. Imagine a cackling hyena the size of a lion in front of you. Scary, right? Well, this creature was more than capable of stalking and eating a full-grown human adult. Pachycrocruta had a mouth large enough to fully envelop a human's head. They were also fast and fierce. There was little possibility of outrunning Pachycrocruta. The human could climb up a tree, but it would have to hope that the giant hyena couldn't knock it over. Even if the tree could hold up against Pachycrocruta, it would just wait. Hyenas are known to be incredibly resilient and resourceful. One way or the other, Pachycrocruta would get its human prey. A recent fossil dig uncovered large mounds of skulls from human ancestors in a waste pile that most likely belonged to Pachycrocruta. This means early humans were definitely on the menu for this monster. You've probably been waiting for this next deadly animal, as it's a predator we all learned about as kids. The saber-toothed tiger was a ferocious hunter and the fourth most deadly animal on our list. Everyone can picture its two oversized teeth hanging from its upper jaw, but there are facts about this predator you may not be aware of. There were actually several species of saber-toothed cats. Some could weigh up to 600 pounds. Their canine blade-like teeth were actually serrated on both edges, making it easier to slice chunks of meat off its prey. Perhaps the scariest thing about the saber-toothed cats was the jaw gape. The saber-toothed cat could open its mouth to around 130 degrees. Most modern large cats can only open their jaws to about 65 degrees. The wide jaw gape of a saber-toothed cat was necessary for it to get food past their long canine teeth. Early humans that were pinned to the ground by the massive jaws of a saber-toothed cat and had to stare into the wide-opened maw of the predator just before it came down on them were most likely scared to death before the saber-tooth even got its jaws around them. Speaking of jaws, our next animal has the most powerful jaws in the animal kingdom. The third most dangerous animal in history is the crocodile. One species in particular was recently found in Kenya, where many early human fossils have been located. Unfortunately for our ancestors, they had to contend with a crocodile named Crocodilus anthropophagus. The name literally means human eating. It was called this because remains of our early ancestors were not discovered far from the crocodile skeleton, suggesting that before the crocodile passed away, it had our ancestors as its last meal. The Crocodilus anthropophagus was around 24 feet long with massive teeth and jaws that could crush a human in a split second. If an early human ancestor got too close to a water hole where this crocodile lurked, they'd be swallowed in one gulp, never to be heard from again. Early human history was a treacherous time. Going anywhere near the water seems to be a dangerous venture that could cost someone their life. Our last two animals are just as deadly today as they were in the past. The most deadly animal in the world to humans, and number 2 on this list, is the mosquito. Mosquitoes kill over 1 million people a year and billions of people over the course of human history. Sure, mosquitoes are annoying, but they're also the most deadly animal to humans of the past and present. Mosquitoes transmit diseases such as malaria, yellow fever, and dengue to humans, all of which can be fatal. As humans progress through history, mosquitoes have evolved with us, causing havoc in populations where mosquitoes are prevalent. Unfortunately for humans, mosquitoes live in almost all parts of the world. And this brings us to the end of our list and to number 1. We know that mosquitoes are the most deadly animal in human history, so what could be left? The first, most dangerous animal in history is us. We've done a really good job at endangering or eliminating many living things on the planet. We've even caused more species to go extinct than any other animal in history. Humans have changed the climate and environments of Earth in a way that no other animal could have. That being said, we also have the ability to fix the damage we've done and save the animals and plants still left on our planet. Even if humans are the most dangerous animals in history, we can also be the most influential animals in protecting and saving the planet. This video is based off of reports coming out of the Eastern Front during World War I. No first-hand accounts were recorded, so what follows is a recreation based on events as reported by soldiers on the front lines. You're a Russian soldier on the front lines of World War I. You're fighting alongside your comrades in the Lithuanian forest. From across the battlefield, you spot your enemy. You take aim through the dense pine trees of the forest. You inhale, then hold your breath to steady your aim. The air is silent as you and your squad track the enemy and prepare fire. You're about to unleash a barrage of bullets when suddenly you hear a guttural growl from the thicket next to you. You glance at where the sound is coming from. Out of the bushes steps the largest wolf you have ever seen. Its eyes are blood red and drool drips from its jowls. You open your mouth to scream, but before you can get a noise out, the wolf lunges and knocks you down. The wolf's jaws and razor-sharp teeth snap at you. You use your rifle as a barrier to protect your neck from the vicious creature. The wolf clamps down on the middle of the rifle, and you hear the wood begin to splinter and crack as its powerful jaws clasp down harder. You look around for help, for anything that could save you. All you see is more and more wolves running out of the bushes. They kick up the freshly fallen snow as they begin attacking your comrades. Screams can be heard from all around. You look up at the wolf who has you trapped under its immense weight. Its claws tear through your army-issued jacket and uniform as if it were tissue paper. You lock eyes with the creature and see that it's driven solely by hunger. The war has displaced animals of all kinds from their natural habitats. These wolves are just trying to survive World War I like everyone else. Unfortunately for you, in order to survive, a wolf has to eat, and you will make a fine meal. The wolf on top of you does not crave human flesh, but there's nothing else to eat. Its usual prey of deer has either been killed and eaten by soldiers or moved on to other areas further east where the war hasn't reached yet. Warm saliva lands on your forehead as the wolf continues to clamp down on the rifle. You glance at the razor-sharp teeth. The rifle's about to snap. The wolf will then have a clear path to your throat and its meal. Suddenly, you hear the crack of a gunfire. The wolf seems to slow. You hear another gunshot. The wolf slowly slumps down on top of you. Its massive weight pins you to the ground. It's been shot and killed. You glance to the side and see the white snow being dyed red. It takes all your strength to roll the heavy canine off your body. Once you've gotten out from under the wolf, you look up to see an outstretched hand offering to help you up. Relieved, you take the hand and are pulled to your feet. What you see next shocks you about as much as the wolf. The man who saved you was not one of your Russian comrades, but an enemy German soldier instead. You thank him in the little broken German that you know. The German soldier picks up your rifle and hands it to you. He then signals for you to follow him deeper into the forest, where the wolves and men are engaged in a battle with one another. You hesitate for a moment, unsure of whether to trust the enemy soldier, but he did save your life, so you give him the benefit of a doubt. The war between two nations has stopped for the moment. The war between beast and man has begun. You've been fighting in World War I since it started in 1914, but you've never experienced anything like the wolf attacks that became common recently. With the help of the Germans, you successfully fend off the pack of wolves that attacked your squad. The commanders of both armies meet and decide to call a momentary truce while you deal with a new enemy. Both sides work together to track and hunt the wolves that have become a menace to soldiers and civilian populations in this region. 1917 becomes the year of the wolf for Russian and German soldiers on the northeastern front of the war. After your commander comes back from the meeting with the Germans, he informs the Russian troops of the momentary truce. He assigns you to a mixed squad of Russian and German soldiers. Your new mission is to track down and hunt the wolves in the area. The attack started with hungry wolves picking at the remains of dead soldiers after battles, but you'll never forget the day they became more bold and aggressive. You shudder as you think back to that horrid day. Your squad was engaged in battle with German forces. You were fighting alongside one of your comrades when he was shot in the leg. You flanked the enemy soldier who shot him and eliminated the threat. But when you turned around to help your fallen comrade, you came upon a gruesome sight. As the wounded soldier tried to crawl back to the safety of your trench, a group of 3 wolves lunged out of the forest. 2 of the wolves grabbed his legs and the other grabbed his neck. They dragged the wounded soldier deeper into the forest. You could hear his screams for help, and then silence as the wolves killed him and ate his remains. And this was not just a one-time occurrence either. You had witnessed wolves run into the middle of a battle and attack soldiers who were not even wounded. The wolves had become bold and fearless. They were driven by hunger. They would do anything for food. This happened on the German side of the battlefield as well. The ceasefire was necessary so that both armies could turn their attention toward the wolves. Casualties of the ravenous creatures were starting to mount. Both sides decided that the war needed to be put on pause so the 4-legged enemy could be stopped. You hear stories from the German soldiers of the first unusual attacks by the wolves. They claimed the attack started when hungry wolves snuck into farms and villages where they killed calves, sheep, and other livestock. Eventually, the packs of wolves had consumed all of the animal food in the area. This was when they turned to eating humans. Their hunger drove them. They ate whatever meat was available. Unfortunately, because of the war, human meat was in plentiful supply. The wolves were forced to attack and eat wounded soldiers to survive. You sit around the campfire with the hunting squad and continue to listen to stories from the German soldiers. Apparently, once livestock started to run out in German farming settlements, the wolves turned to a different prey. They started to hunt the children of the village. At this point, the wolves were in smaller packs. The group you hunt now could be as many as 50 strong. A full-grown adult can do some serious harm to a single wolf or a small pack with a weapon, but children are little and easy prey to pick off. Wolves will lay in wait until the children of the village come out of their homes and then grab them. They'll pull the child into the forest where they can eat it in peace. War is gruesome enough without wolves hunting children, you say to the others around the campfire. You stand up and stretch. It's time for you to go on watch. You climb up into a large boulder and sit silently. From the bushes, you can see the firelight reflecting off the eyes of something watching you. It looks like 2 unmoving fireflies in the darkness of night. You bring your rifle up to your shoulder. The eyes disappear. Was it just my imagination, you think? The wolves have become clever. They'll wait until a soldier leaves the group to relieve himself. Once they're alone, it's easier for the pack to surround him and attack. You and the other soldiers start moving about in small groups. This seems to keep the wolves at bay. However, snipers who are used to working alone still travel out of the hunting party solo. They take up positions in trees, high off the ground and away from the sharp teeth and claws of the wolves. Nonetheless, some snipers aren't so lucky. They are specially trained to track and eliminate enemies from long distances, but wolves have been in these forests a lot longer than humans. This is their natural habitat, and they've evolved to be perfect predators. Even with their stealthiness and accuracy, snipers cannot fend off packs of hungry wolves that have stalked them. The sniper might not even know they're being hunted until it's too late. During this time and location of the war, more snipers have been attacked by wolves than by enemy soldiers. The wolf hunting squad you're assigned to is tasked with making contact with a village not too far from where you were first attacked. Your squad enters the village. It's a ghost town. There are no signs of life anywhere. Fires smolder and smoke rises from the warm charcoal, but no one seems to be in the village. Then you come across a horrible sight. Blood covers the snowy ground. All around there are wolf prints. The pack of wolves must have been at least 50 strong, and they ate all of the villagers. You decide it's time for drastic measures. Your squad sets up traps around the area and puts poison in fresh meat. You lay out nets and snares to catch the murderous wolves. Your traps are successful, and you end up eliminating some of the pack. But the wolves still have a large group, and they're on the prowl. Your squad of Russian and German soldiers tracks the pack. You come upon them as they're scavenging a battlefield from an earlier battle. The mixed squad takes positions along the tree line. You first throw a grenade into the middle of the pack. It detonates, killing several wolves in the explosion. The squad takes aim and fires at the wolves as they scatter. Some of the larger, more aggressive wolves run toward your squad. You fire your rifle. The bullets seem to have little effect on such large creatures, but your hunting squad unleashes a storm of bullets. Finally, the approaching wolves are stopped and fall over dead in the snow. Through the joint efforts of both armies, hundreds of wolves are killed. Their reign of terror has ended. Some wolves got away and relocated to deeper parts of the forest. Their numbers are smaller now, and so they're not as bold. They also leave war zones for areas with more deer and prey for them to eat further to the north and east. Russia is a vast country, and the war has not and never will reach all of the wilderness of northern Russia. After the wolf threat is dealt with, your commander meets again with his German counterpart. They disband the joint hunting squads and each soldier returns to his side. The war resumes as it did before. Russians killing Germans, Germans killing Russians. Without the mutual enemy to bring the two sides together, they're back to battling one another. When you return home from the war, you find that your joint wolf hunting force has made headlines around the world. The ceasefire and wolf hunt is written about in both German and Russian newspaper outlets. One of your friends who lives in the United States sends you clippings from the New York Times titled Russian Wolves. Another article about your exploits is printed in the Oklahoma City Times and called Battle Halts While Troops Fight Wolves. It seems that all across the world, the stories of man versus wolf on the Russian front has made headlines. You think about how a world war that could pit so many countries against one another can be brought to a halt by a common enemy. The wolves that hunted and ate humans in the forests of Germany and Russia caused an unlikely alliance. The two armies were forced to work together to overcome their common enemy of man-eating wolves. It's 1823. You're hiking around Missouri as part of a mission to get hides. As you do, you heard some guy called General Ashley wanted volunteers to take part in a fur trading venture, and you thought, why not? I am Hugh Glass after all. Explorer, fur trapper, trader, hunter, and all-around legend. So there you are, heading along the Yellowstone River with all the fur you could dream of in tow, feeling like a badass. But things start to go south, and I don't mean in a geographic sense. First, a local Native American tribe called the Arikara attack your group. Not sure what their problem is, here you are just minding your own business in your home territory when they launch themselves at you for no reason. You make it out with only a bullet wound, but some of the other guys in the group die, so things aren't off to a great start. Still, on you go. One day you go off on your own and there you are checking out an area, seeing if you can get any of them hides, and your mind drifts into an idle daydream. You picture yourself returning to your hometown carrying a bag with 1 million fur hides. Everyone there is chanting your name and cheering. You're Hugh Glass, the man and the legend, and your name will go down forever in history. Your mother is crying and that girl who turned you down when you were 16 is begging you for forgiveness. You can almost smell her scent when suddenly you feel something warm and furry rub against your foot. It could almost be a nice feeling if you knew it was just a cat, but you know it's not a cat. You look down nervously. A grizzly bear. A grizzly bleeding bear. And not only that, but a cub. It would be cute if you didn't know that the mother was going to be somewhere around the corner, ready to go crazy at you for threatening her children's lives. And before you can even formulate an action plan, you see her in the corner of your eye, charging at you. It's almost like in your daydream, except the pretty girl has been replaced by a huge grizzly bear. Next thing you know, you're being picked up and scratched and torn apart. You scream in agony, and for a moment you accept your fate. You're ready to surrender your life to the Lord above. You feel like you lived a good life, an honest life. But then you remember you're Hugh Glass, the explorer, the fur trapper, the trader, the hunter, the all-around legend, and you're not ready to die. Not here, not now. Somehow, you manage to fight back, punching at the bear with all your strength. Maybe some of the other guys help a bit too, but it was mostly you. Miraculously, the bear dies and you manage to get away. At first, you feel relieved and grateful and perhaps even a little smug, but soon the adrenaline starts to wear off and the pain begins to kick in. Your leg hurts, like it really hurts. Maybe it's broken, and your body is covered in bruises, cuts, and wounds. How on earth are you going to carry on with a trip like this? You're hundreds of miles from the nearest camp. These other guys wouldn't leave you, right? Of course not, you're a living legend. Since you can no longer walk, the men take turns carrying you so the journey can continue. They treat your wounds and they give you food. It seems like all is good in the hood, but one evening while you're pretending to sleep, you overhear a secret meeting. So, what we gonna do about Hugh? I don't know. I kept thinking those wounds were gonna kill him at any minute, but he just keeps going. He's slowing the group down. We have to carry him the whole way. We put everyone in danger. I could strangle him about now. Absolutely not. We have morals. Two of you can stay behind with him while the rest of us go on ahead. He'll die in a few days, so at least you can stay and bury him when he dies. Well, I'm not doing it. Me neither. So there you are, laid down with your eyes shut, becoming overly conscious of your breathing patterns as your fellow fur traders have this distasteful argument. Eventually, a good old-fashioned monetary bribe persuades two men to volunteer. Some people might scream or cry in such a dire situation, but not you. That night, you make a pact to yourself that you'll outright refuse to die just to spite them. As the days go on, you pretend you didn't hear a word of that secret conversation, and three of you hike through the forest, joking and making merry. But eventually, the camaraderie starts to break down. You can't help but notice the passive-aggressive undertone during conversations and the awkward silences. Worried they'll betray their promise and abandon you in the forest, you start to sleep with one eye open. Then, one day, the three of you are ambushed by a tribe. Again. Jeez, what is it with those guys? What did anyone ever do to them? Your two kindly volunteers, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, don't hesitate to throw you roughly to the floor, and then they pull out their weapons as if they're hoping one last knock will do you in. And next thing you know, you wake up unconscious in the middle of the forest with a banging headache and some burning wounds. What just happened? An ambush. For a second, you're worried the tribe kidnapped you, but you seem to be alone. Where on earth are your companions? It doesn't take long for you to put two and two together. They must have used the attack as a convenient excuse to take off and leave you for dead. Charming. If only they could see you now, still alive and thriving, like the absolute beast you are. But the smugness wears off when you realize the true gravity of your situation. You can't walk, and now there's nobody to carry you. And where is all your stuff? They must have taken them. Now you have no weapons, no food, and shoot, no medical supplies. But hey, at least they covered you up with this cozy bear hide. So you wrap yourself up in the fur and get to thinking about how to make the best of a bad situation. You set your broken leg and weigh up your likelihood of making it. Thinking back to a conversation your loyal companions were having about the journey that lay ahead, you remember you're about 200 miles away from the next base. It's far, but doable, and the river's just over there. As long as you should follow it, you should be able to get back. You puff your chest up and you crawl because your leg is broken and there's no other way of moving available. That's got to be painful on the knees. After a few hours, it becomes apparent that being covered in open wounds could soon cause a big problem. If those sores get infected, it's game over. You could end up with gangrene and who knows what else. At first, you try to wash your wounds in the river, but you can tell it's not quite cutting it. Forgive the pun. Then you feel a wiggling sensation in one of your leg wounds. Ew, is that a… Yep. It's a maggot. Your instinct is to yank it off and exact your revenge, but then you have a eureka moment. Maggots eat dead tissue. So if you leave them on your wounds, they'll eat all the infected stuff and help to fight off the infection. Oh, what the heck, you're going all in. You grab a handful of maggots that just so happen to be resting nearby and put them on all your wounds. What else is a man to do? A few days pass like this, with you crawling along the riverside, with a few dozen maggots eating your rotting flesh, and you drink the water as you go and scavenge all the berries and roots you can find along the way. So far, you're still alive, but you're not getting anywhere fast, and your knees really hurt at this point. You need a plan, a big move, to up the pace and get going. And that's when you have your second eureka moment. You notice a few good-sized logs nearby. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Haha! In the classic Big Boss fashion, you make a makeshift raft using the logs and a few pieces from plants. Noah would be proud. And on you go, paddling along. It's not the most comfortable boat in the world, but anything is better than crawling at this point. After 6 long weeks, somehow, against all odds, you make it. There were cheers and hugs all around, and emotions were high, and they all lived happily ever after. Oh, wait. I'm getting this mixed up with something else. Actually, you arrive at a deserted camp, typical, and instead of your companions, you find a hastily written note saying that the whole group relocated to a new camp. Most people would give up, but not you, not Hugh Glass. You can just keep paddling and scavenging along for a few hundred miles more like it's nothing. Finally, in 1824, having covered around 1,000 miles in total, you reach the base where your ex-companions are staying. I'd love to hear that conversation. Why'd you leave me for dead and steal from me, bro? Innocent mistake. You decide not to cast blame on the younger companion. He's inexperienced and was probably easy to influence in such an extreme high-pressure situation. The older guy, on the other hand, he knew exactly what he was doing. So one day you walk into the fort where you know the man is based and demand a confrontation. Your mind dizzy at the thought of finally extracting your revenge. Unfortunately, he'd become a soldier, meaning he had government protection, so your request was denied. But you vow you'll wait as long as it takes until you can finally give him what he deserves. It's quite the tale, right? If you ever watched The Revenant, you might have picked up on a few discrepancies between the story that's just unfolded and what happened to Leonardo DiCaprio. And that's because A, Hollywood, and B, we basically have no idea what really happened. Some say that Glass's wounds healed halfway through the expedition and he was able to walk again. Others claim he was picked up by French trappers on his way back, and one story alleges he once woke up to find a grizzly bear licking his infected wounds. Because that all sounds believable. To be honest, I figure if everyone else was rewriting history, then I may as well join in, and I added a few of my own spicy details into the story. Hugh Glass was a real person, that's for sure. He was certainly an explorer, a fur trapper, a trader, and a hunter, and he was in his early 40s. Chances are he really did join the fur expedition and then ended up getting abandoned by his companions in one way or another. But the legend of him crawling through the forest in such a dramatic fashion might be questionable. The thing is, Glass himself didn't write anything about his experiences. The majority of the information we have written is by his contemporaries, which they claim to have acquired from conversations with Glass. So not only are we trusting in Glass and his honesty, we're also trusting in the honesty of the writers. One of the best accounts of the tale is a story published in a journal by an anonymous author, but he later turned out to be the brother of the publication's editor. So yeah, make of that what you will. And if the story about the grizzly bear and the crawling seems unbelievable to you, then get a load of this. According to some accounts, whilst working as a sailor, Glass was seized by pirates and forced to either join the gang or die. He then spent the next year living as a buccaneer, before escaping by swimming through an infested sea to safety. Another tale is that Glass was captured by a tribe who were about to kill him, but at the last minute he convinced them to adopt him as their son. He then lived amongst the tribe for years in peace and prosperity. I mean, I guess that explains how he learned all the survival skills needed to survive in the woods by himself. So how did a man seemingly so invincible eventually die? Glass was eventually killed by an attack near the same Yellowstone River by the Ankara tribe. Or that's how the story goes anyway. It's probably all just a nice legend to tell by the campfire. It's like being told Santa Claus isn't real all over again. However, it goes without saying that the world has seen some incredible, genuine survival stories. I've been asked time and again, what was it like when it had its teeth around you? I've relived that moment far too many times, but I still couldn't tell you with clarity what I was thinking. There was adrenaline and fear, but what still burns in my memory was its eye, with my own eyes being just inches away. That pure, perfect, impassive aggression as it had both of my arms between its jagged teeth, shearing my flesh from the bone, snapping those bones with such ease. And I think what went through my mind was an unconscious realization that I was just meat. This was all in a day's work, and it was nothing personal. It was hungry, and I was there. As it ripped my limbs from my body, I think I accepted my fate. I was seafood, and it was a bad day to go surfing. Do you know what they say about me now? They say I shouldn't be alive, but I am. And here's my story. It was October 2014, and my girlfriend and I decided to go to the beach. This was off the coast of Esperance in Western Australia, some of the most beautiful and enchanting coastline in the country. But I was there for the surfing, not so much the views. You could say surfing was my life. It was what I was put here to do. Morning, afternoon, day in, day out, that's what I did when I wasn't working. I never thought about the dangers. If you did, you'd never get in the water. Statistically, there is little chance you'll get seriously injured surfing, never mind die. I knew it happened to some people. I knew people had lost their lives to sharks, lost limbs, had their stomachs ripped open, but I never thought it would happen to me. When I wasn't working, that's all I did, surf. I traveled the coast looking for the perfect break, traveling far and wide in an attempt to discover some hidden gem, my own private surfing paradise. The more remote, the better, and on that fateful day, I'd found such a place. It was about 8 a.m. when I first got in the water. The waves were perfect. The forecast for the day in my mind was another brilliant day with the waves, the elements, the closest thing you can get to walking on water. That's what people might not realize about surfing. The majesty of being carried along the waves, the sublime feeling of being lost in the moment. For me, that was my religious ecstasy. It was my answer to futility. Everything made sense to me when I was in the water. I was on an isolated stretch of beach, a place where you'd find few surfers. What I didn't know was that the locals were all well aware there had been a lot of shark sightings there before I ended up starting out on the horizon with my board. 2 great whites had been spotted just over a week before I went in that water. In fact, I later saw photos of one of those beasts right behind a guy who was surfing. This I knew nothing about at the time. My girlfriend was always wary of sharks, but for me, I simply put them out of my mind. That day she said she was going to lie back and do a bit of sunbathing. I spent some of my morning trying to teach her this great skill, but she got fed up of that, and then it was time for me to go it alone. The conditions were right for a shark attack. A large swell and poor visibility in the water, but as I said, I never worried about such things. I paddled out, away from my girl, someone who would never see me completely whole again. The sun shone down on her as I paddled further away into the water, the waves eclipsing my body. Now a soundless image to my lover. There I was, pretty much isolated, ready to take on the surf. And then it struck, like being hit by a vehicle, slammed by a submarine. Immediately I felt something snap, as if whatever hit me had dislocated my knee. When that happens, you need to think rationally, but in the panic, the pain, the shock, it overrides reason. That's when I saw the thing, a great white shark, and it wasn't done with me in the slightest. I tried to paddle, but not to splash around too much. What I didn't know is that the pain I felt wasn't a break or a dislocation from an impact, it was a bite. That beast had bitten right into both my legs just below the knee. I would have already been gushing blood, but my only concern was not getting hit again. I headed to the shore, but this thing just kept circling around me. I've never felt so vulnerable in my life, so small, so weak, and at the mercy of something else. And then, again it came, rushing in so fast I was completely helpless. I tried to push myself up on the board, guard myself against its rage, its hunger. It worked. That time, it took a chunk of the board instead of a chunk of me. There was perhaps hope now. The shark moved farther away, and I paddled slowly toward the shore where my girlfriend was sitting completely unaware of what was happening to me. But the shark was only setting itself up for another charge. It had me in its sights, and it came from behind. Third time, unlucky. I tried to do the same and flip myself around and defend myself with the board. It was too fast, too strong, and this time it emerged from the water, and those teeth, those eyes, were right on me. It grabbed me in its mouth and swung me to the side, and that's when my eyes met its eye. Something I will never be able to delete from my memory. Looking into that polished orb, the darkest and blackest thing I've ever looked into. A glaring stare, cruel and cold, and perfectly natural. To this day, I can't even think of that sight without shivering at the horror of what I saw. I remember vividly how the shutter of its eye closed as it bit down on me. This is my recurring, real-life nightmare, and I play it out a lot even now. Both my arms are now in its mouth, and it's violently shaking me, trying to rip them off, wanting me, needing me as merely another meal in its daily routine. It dragged me down, and I had to hold my breath. There was no way I was getting away from it, not until it had some of my meat. Next thing I knew, I was back with my head above water, now stained by my own blood. Not entirely whole, I thrashed in this red sea, alive, but close to death. The shark had ripped off most of the flesh of one of my arms, so much so it looked like a chicken bone stripped down of all its flesh. It also had my other hand. I tried to get away. Even as disabled as I was, I tried to swim. The irony of it all is that if it hadn't taken those limbs as a snack, it would have likely kept me under the water and drowned me. I lost some pieces, but that saved me in the end. I tried to paddle again toward the beach, in shock, but intent to survive this ordeal. My surfboard was gone, floating further out to sea. And then bang, I'm hit again, but not by the same shark. There are two of them now, and all I can do is kick my legs. I saw one of the sharks heading in for another attack, but then Mother Nature literally got my back. A wave broke behind me, and I could just about body surf it and get away from the sharks. And then another wave came, and I rode that too. About this time, my girlfriend saw me riding that wave. She stood up, and when I couldn't stand myself, she witnessed my lopsided, mangled body, dripping blood, shredded. I got lucky again because 2 cars of people arrived at this isolated bit of beach. Some people in those families had first aid training, which was another stroke of luck. The authorities were called. "We've got a shark attack here. Come immediately." I was still trying to get through the shallows to the beach, and then a couple of guys from those families came out to get me. I was at that point on my back, eyes closed, close to death. I remember them grabbing me and pulling me back to the beach. They pulled me partly by my torso, having lost one arm and some of the other. After they got me to the beach, they surveyed my injuries. Both my legs and both my arms had to be tied with a tourniquet, or else I would have bled out. I was actually conscious of all of this going on. I even said to my girlfriend, I don't think Mom is going to be happy about this. My attempt, I guess, at very dark humor. I told her I loved her because I was aware I might not ever see her again. I survived only because of those people on the beach who made sure I didn't bleed out. I survived because waves broke and carried me away from those animals. I survived out of love for my girlfriend, for my family. I also survived because at the beach, those people had made a makeshift stretcher out of a surfboard. It was hard to breathe. I was fighting for my life, and part of me thought this could be it, the end. The medics found me, conscious and talking. I said to the guy, please just stop this pain. Ravaged, I was taken to the hospital where I would receive multiple blood and plasma infusions. They later flew me to Perth for life-saving surgery. In the end, my body was a patchwork of 95 stitches and 45 staples holding it together. I lost most of my left arm and my right hand. My tendons and my legs were so badly damaged the road to walking again was a long one. At the beginning, it was just hard to get out of bed. What was merely a meal to those beasts became months and months of mental torment for me. There were a lot of bad days. Trust me, not being able to tie your shoelaces has an effect on you. But thanks to prosthetic limbs, I'm able to do most basic things now. I learned to live again, and the days of depression were outnumbered by the good days. I learned to drive with this new partly mechanical body. I cooked food, I drank beers with my mates, and I can't tell you how good it felt just to be able to hold a bottle again. How great it felt just to brush my own teeth. My girlfriend has stood by me. She's never left my side, and this year, we got married. I even had the chance to visit those families who no doubt saved my life. I am eternally in debt to those people. Just 4 years after the attack, I represented Australia in the 2018 Winter Olympics on the Paris snowboarding team. I came 5th in the men's banked slalom SBUL and 9th in the men's snowboard cross SBU. It's not bad, but I wanted to do better, and I did. In 2019, I got my first medal, which was a bronze in the men's snowboard cross UL at the World Paris Snowboard Championships. You could ask me now if I miss the water, the sublimity of riding the waves, the majesty of the ocean on a sunny day. My answer would be that I'm okay with the snow. For the most part, it's toothless, and I doubt I'll be snowboarding into a bear anytime soon. One short scream, and John was under the waves. From their vantage point on the raft, 4 survivors watch in horror as tiger sharks rip their friend apart. The sharks are in a feeding frenzy and begin to eat John while he's still alive and struggling to surface for air. 5 days earlier, the skies are clear and the sea is calm. It's perfect weather for sailing, and Deborah Scale and Kylie, her friends Brand Kavanaugh and Mark Adams, and Captain John Lipoth, along with his girlfriend Meg Mooney, are all enjoying cutting through the low waves aboard the Trashman, an 18-meter luxury yacht decked out with all the luxuries of 1982. The 5 have been hired by a billionaire to sail his yacht from Maine to its new owner down in Florida, and the experienced sailors are making great time. It's a total cake job. The weather is wonderful, the yacht is pretty plush, plus she's a speed demon and zips through the waves like a hot knife through butter. The Trashman is worth every dollar spent on her, and Deborah can't believe she's actually being paid to basically take a pleasure cruise down to sunny Florida with some of her closest friends. The group is having a blast and thoroughly enjoying their adventure, sailing through the first night and into yet another perfect sunrise. But later in the day, clouds start brewing. At first, the group thinks it'll just be another late-season storm, some wind, some showers, rough seas, but nothing of any real concern. Plus, the crew is made up of veteran sailors, trained and experienced in handling stormy seas. The calm waves begin to grow as the rain pours down and wind gusts. Normally 6 to 8 feet, the waves are now peaking at 20 feet. The Trashman handles them no problem, though the big dips and crests throw the crew around some. Meg Mooney accidentally slashes her leg on some rigging. The cut's not life-threatening, but it is deep and large. She struggles to bandage it as best as she can as the waves only continue to grow in intensity. She has no idea that cutting her leg open has just doomed her friends to a horrible fate. The boat struggles through what's now becoming a full-blown tropical storm, and as night falls, the waves are reaching a whopping 40 to 50 feet. The Trashman struggles through the gale-force winds and massive waves, but she's taking on water. The bailing pumps are working overtime, but it's an obviously losing battle. The small yacht is being swamped. Then, as another massive wave breaks over the ship, it's too late. The Trashman has taken on too much water and is starting to slip beneath the waves. There's no time to grab supplies. Going below decks is a death sentence. Instead, the crew hurries to free an 11-foot Zodiac raft from the sinking yacht. It's their only chance to survive, and they desperately tug at the ropes holding it in place even as the ship begins to drag it under. With a final desperate tug, the raft pops free, just in time. All 5 crew members tread water and watch as the lights on the sinking trashman blink off, the yacht sinking to the bottom. But in that brief flicker of light, Deborah thinks she sees something. It's shaped like a torpedo, a large fish of some sort. Meg is running on pure adrenaline as she struggles to get onto the raft. Her leg is bleeding profusely, the stress of trying to get off the sinking ship having torn free the bandage she had wrapped around the wound. For several minutes, Meg's leg has been bleeding freely into the Atlantic Ocean, and something has noticed it. The crew have to fight the massive waves to pull themselves up onto the raft. As he kicks against the water to lift himself up, Mark feels something hit his leg with considerable force. He calls out in surprise, and Deborah leans over to look at the water below Mark, her face draining white in panic. There, just a few feet below Mark, is that familiar torpedo-shaped body, and beyond it, more like it, dozens of them. Sharks. Tiger sharks, to be exact. The most dangerous shark in the ocean. Known as the garbage cans of the sea, tiger sharks eat anything they come across. Incredibly aggressive, tiger sharks will even kill and eat prey just to deny it to another shark. And they're known to swarm the location of wounded prey and even attack each other while in the midst of a mindless feeding frenzy. Mortally wounded tiger sharks have been documented still eating prey. And now the sound of the sinking ship and the smell of Meg's blood in the water has drawn 24 tiger sharks to the raft's location. The sharks are anxious, and as the crew fights the waves, the blood-crazed sharks begin to ram into the raft, trying to knock it over and force someone overboard. Over and over again, the sharks attack the Zodiac, smashing into it at high speed, driven into a frenzy by Meg's bleeding wound. Luckily for the shipwrecked 5, the storm eventually blows itself out, as do the sharks, and as dawn comes, the sea is calm once again. But as Deborah and her friends look out across the waves, they see dozens of fins cutting through the water. The sharks are still there. And to make matters worse, there's no sign of land or another ship, and they've been blown into the Gulf Stream off the coast of North Carolina, into a lane of ocean rarely frequented by normal shipping. They didn't even get a chance to radio off a mayday before the ship sank, and there's no rescue beacon technology in the early 80s. In fact, the group of 5 has absolutely nothing with them but the clothes on their backs. No food, no water, an ocean full of sharks, and nobody knows the trashman has sunk. The group tries to keep each other's spirits up. They know they're off the coast of North Carolina somewhere, and the east coast of the United States is one of the busiest stretches of ocean in the world. It's only a matter of time before somebody spots them, be it a merchant vessel or even a US Navy ship. They feel relieved at first, but Meg isn't doing very well. She's lost a lot of blood, but even worse, it's clear her wound is becoming infected. Even now, it's turning purplish and bruising. And the sight of the fins in the water is an ever-constant reminder of what lurks just past a few inches of hard rubber raft. Dawn of the second day stranded at sea. Dehydration is starting to take a serious toll on the crew. There's no cover from the sun above their heads, and now Deborah and her friends are wishing for a new storm. At least then there'd be cloud cover to shield them from the brutal sun's rays, and even better, sweet, sweet rainwater to drink. The 5 are growing weak and hungry, but dehydration is getting the worst of them. Meg's wound is definitely infected, and she's growing very sick. There's nothing they can do for her. There's no food, no water, no medical supplies, nothing but their rubber raft and the vast open ocean all around them. Also, the sharks. Incredibly, though their numbers have dwindled somewhat, the tiger sharks have stuck with the raft. It's probably because the water the crew bail out of the bottom of the raft is full of Meg's blood and now pus. They're basically chumming the waters around them, but they have no other option. If they don't continuously bail water, this raft will sink just like the trashman. By the dawn of their 3rd day stranded at sea, Mark and John can't take it anymore. Dehydration has impaired their judgment, and even as Deborah and Brad pull at them and scream for them to stop, Mark and John lean over the edge of the raft and begin gulping down briny seawater. This is a fatal mistake. The salt-laden seawater might have cured their thirst temporarily, but the ingestion of so much sodium forces their kidneys to work overtime in a bid to expel the lethal salt. Mark and John are actually urinating out more water than they're taking in, exponentially accelerating their dehydration. It only takes hours for the hallucinations to begin. John shouts out in happy surprise when he spots land on the horizon, but there's only one problem. It's a dehydration-inspired hallucination. Brad and Deborah try to talk John down, telling him he's hallucinating and there's nothing out there, but he only grows agitated at the two. Finally, he decides his only chance is to swim for the safety of the phantom shore that only he can see. Weak and severely dehydrated themselves, there's nothing Deborah and Brad can do as John jumps into the water. The sharks have been waiting. They're on him in seconds. One tiger shark strikes him in the leg, sinking his teeth deep into his flesh. John screams and then goes quiet as a second tiger shark then drags him under the waves. John does not surface again, The tigers are feeding with such ferocity that they keep his body under. Deborah turns away in horror. She's too shell-shocked and dehydrated to cry. The only sound is the vigorous splashing of sharks as they snatch up any stray bits of John floating about. They'll eat again, real soon. A few hours later, Mark begins acting peculiar. He's clearly unaware of his surroundings. It's as if he doesn't even realize he's on a raft in the middle of the ocean. In fact, he clearly thinks he's back home, and he needs to make a run to the store. Just like that, Mark stands up, takes a step, and falls right off the side of the boat. Bam! The force of the attack slams Mark's body into the bottom of the raft. Then another massive blow from below as yet another shark tears into Mark. The raft is pummeled by sharks as big as the raft itself, and the feeding frenzy goes into overdrive just inches underneath Deborah and Brad. Mark is gone, but the sharks aren't. Despite having eaten two of their friends, the sharks continue to circle the raft, occasionally nudging it as if testing it to see if it might sink soon. Deborah and Brad continue to bail water through the rest of the horrible day. Meg, far too sick to do anything. She's hardly conscious anymore. The infection has begun to turn her leg black as it aggressively spreads through her bloodstream. The bottom of the raft is filled with a mixture of urine, blood, and pus, and Meg is now catatonic and unresponsive. As night falls, Deborah and Brad try to get what sleep they can, careful to maintain a grip so a wave doesn't pitch them over the side and into the jaws of the hungry tigers below them. A few hours later, the two wake up from their fitful sleep. It's still dark, but under moonlight it's become clear. Meg is dead. The infection has spread through her body and shut down her organs. The only question is what to do with her. The two are starving, and both are intimately familiar with the stories of sailors committing cannibalism in order to survive. It's a bona fide taboo of the worst kind, but a stranded sailor lost at sea is always forgiven for committing what to many is the most horrific act imaginable, eating human flesh. Brad begins to consider how to best begin to eat Meg, but Deborah warns him Meg is too infected to eat. Her body is still boiling with an out-of-control infection that's now consuming it from the inside out. Despite their starvation, eating Meg could prove fatal, but they can't keep the body in the raft with them. The filthy water they have to continuously bail is filled with her bodily fluids, and the smallest nick could see them infected as well. There's just one thing to do. The two remove Meg's jewelry and her shirt, hoping to give it to a family member should they survive the ordeal. Then, with grim determination, they move the naked body onto the side of the raft and prepare to push it over. Despite intense dehydration and near delirium though, the two stop. It doesn't feel right to just dump Meg over without saying something, so Deborah improvises, and she recites the Lord's Prayer and Psalm 23. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And with a splash, they push Meg's body overboard. The sharks were waiting. Physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted, the two simply roll back over to the edge of the raft and settle into the murky bottom. They close their eyes and drift off to sleep as the sharks devour their dead friend. Dawn breaks on the 5th day. Brad and Deborah are close to death and they know it. Their bodies are covered in staph infections, their mind on the edge of full-blown delirium, even as their organs begin to shut down, and the sharks are still there. Then suddenly there's something on the horizon, a ship. Brad wipes his eyes and looks again, then blinks and looks a third time. He can't believe it, but it's real. And even more incredibly, the distant ship seems to be sailing straight for them. The two leap up to their feet and begin yelling as loud as they can and waving their arms around. Miraculously, a deckhand spots them and begins waving back. A Soviet cargo vessel rescues the two hundreds of miles from the American coast. The ship's medic immediately begins to treat their serious infections as the crew brings them water and food to eat. A few days later, the two will be back in the US where they'll be hospitalized as they recover from their ordeal. But the haunting memory of sharks eating their friends alive will be with them until the day they die. You're at the beach one day going for a pleasant swim under the hot sun. It's a perfect day to spend floating lazily in the ocean, aside from that cut in your hand you got from a nasty barnacle on an underwater rock. But you don't pay much attention to it. You're too busy relaxing out in the water. So relaxed, in fact, that you don't even notice the fin cresting out of the water toward you. Just because you haven't been paying attention to the cut on your hand doesn't mean nobody has. In fact, to some residents of the ocean, you smell downright delicious. Sharks. They're some of the oldest vertebrates on the planet, having lived even before the dinosaurs. From the tiny parasitic cookie-cutter shark to the massive filter-feeding whale shark to the majestic but deadly great white, the shark family has dominated the ocean for the past 420 million years. They've been feared, respected, and even worshipped by seafaring civilizations for thousands of years, and in recent times have been unfairly targeted out of fear due to movies like Jaws and Deep Blue Sea portraying sharks as homicidal monsters. It's easy to see where that reputation comes from. Even though sharks only rarely target humans, they possess a number of adaptations that make them the ocean's perfect killers. Probably the most famous and feared of these adaptations is a shark's ability to smell blood in the water from miles away. But that's just one part of the amazing biology that makes the shark the greatest hunter in the ocean. Before we answer our main question, let's take a quick crash course in why sharks are incredible 101. There are 500 species of shark, and all are members of the Selachimorpha family, a group that also includes rays. This family is unique among fish because unlike other vertebrates who have skeletons composed of bone, sharks and rays have skeletons composed of cartilage, the same material that forms the structure of your ears and nose. Cartilage is sturdy but also flexible, and much lower density than bone, allowing sharks to be buoyant in water without needing a swim bladder like other marine animals. In addition to this lack of a swim bladder, sharks also have a very specific pattern of fin placement. Ask anyone to draw a shark, and they'll know where to place the fins: a large dorsal fin on the back, a fin on either side, and a vertical fin on the end of the tail. It's no mistake that pretty much all shark species have this fin configuration. It's the perfect arrangement to maximize speed and maneuverability. Fish that have swim bladders are kind of like hot air balloons. They can only change depth by squeezing out some of the gas stored in their swim bladders, which then refills over time as they take in oxygen from the water around them. But because sharks don't need a swim bladder to stay afloat, they're more like a fighter jet, able to dive up and down in the water using only the propulsion of their back fins. That's why the arrangement of a shark's fins looks like little wings on an airplane. The two side fins are used to change direction while the upper dorsal fin acts as a stabilizer. So unlike other fish, sharks can cruise at high speeds, stop quickly, swim directly up or down, and turn on a dime. This makes it very easy for them to chase their prey. Sharks are also unique from other fish in the texture of their skin. Despite what you might think, sharks aren't smooth. Instead of having scales like other fish, they're actually covered in small teeth called denticles, which gives their skin a rough texture like sandpaper. These denticles provide a layer of lightweight armor, but are arranged in a way that minimizes drag while swimming, making sharks extremely hydrodynamic. Like all fish, sharks breathe by filtering oxygen out of the water as they swim, but their gills are structured a little bit differently. You might have heard it said that sharks will suffocate if they stop moving, and while that's not true of all sharks, it is true for a number of shark species. While some species like the wabgong are ambush predators and have the capability of laying still for long periods of time, most sharks lack a gill pump and breathe through a process called ram ventilation. As long as the shark is moving, water will flow into the gill slits where it rushes over the shark's gill filaments, allowing the oxygen in the water to diffuse into the shark's bloodstream. Now, back to our central question. Another commonly repeated fact about sharks is that they can locate a single drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool worth of water. That might sound impossible, but sharks really do have amazing senses at their disposal that they use to hunt. Sharks have incredibly keen hearing, able to detect sounds below the range of human hearing. Eyesight varies from species. The great white and other species that hunt close to the surface of the water have quite poor eyesight, which is the main reason behind most shark attacks. The hammerhead, in contrast, has an extremely wide field of view owing to its bizarrely shaped head. Sharks also have a very highly developed sense of taste, with some species in fact being very picky eaters. Great whites in particular are known for their pickiness. Even though they're the largest, most powerful, and most deadly of the macropredatory sharks, macropredatory meaning sharks that eat anything larger than plankton, great whites normally feed on seals, otters, dolphins, and large fish like tuna and mackerel, but because of their poor eyesight, they rely on smell and movement to hunt, and will usually take an initial test bite of whatever prey they found. If the taste isn't to their liking, they'll spit it out and abandon the kill entirely. This is what happens in most shark attacks. Sharks will mistake humans for their regular prey and then leave them after one bite, once they realize what they've just chomped on. So if you're afraid of sharks, maybe you can take a little comfort in knowing that great whites at least don't find people very appetizing. But the most impressive of a shark's senses is, as we said before, their sense of smell. Sharks have two forward-facing nostrils, which passively take in water as the shark swims. The water is filtered through folds of tissue that contain millions of sensory cells that can pick up even the tiniest trace of blood. That alone is impressive. But what really gives the shark's sense of smell a killer edge is the fact that it's directional, much like our sense of hearing. The position and shape of the nostrils means that each one detects smells separately, so a shark can tell whether the scent of blood is being picked up by the left or right nostril. Using that information, the shark can follow the trail and hone in on the exact location of the wounded animal that the blood is coming from. On top of their amazing senses of smell, sharks have another sense that's unique to them, as well as their close cousins, rays and skates. This sense is called electroreception, and it's exactly what it sounds like. the ability to more or less smell electricity. All animals conduct electricity. It's what allows our muscles to move around. The more we move, the more electricity our muscles release. Air is a poor conductor of electricity. So on land, the ambient charge created by living creatures is simply dissipated into the air or down through our feet into the ground. Water, however, especially salt water, is an excellent conductor. So when animals swim through the water, the tiny charges that our bodies create influence an electrical field that extends far away from us. Sharks, using a cluster of specialized pores on the tips of their nose called the ampullae of Lorenzini, can detect those charges from the field. Like their sense of smell, their sense of electroreception is directional because the ampullae of Lorenzini is connected to the shark's lateral line. The lateral line is an organ that most fish and amphibians possess. It's a kind of tube that runs along their bellies to the end of their tails that helps them sense things like water pressure and currents. This helps them maintain a sense of direction in the featureless open ocean. A shark's sense of electroreception combined with their extremely keen sense of smell are probably the shark's two greatest weapons when it comes to locating prey. When their noses pick up a trace of blood, they can use their ampullae to sniff out the electric currents being released by whatever distressed animal the blood is coming from. Then, using their directional sense of smell, they follow the scent along with the electrical currents until they're able to pinpoint the exact location of their prey. Because sharks have such keen senses and are excellent trackers, one whiff of fish guts can attract dozens of sharks at a time. And because sharks are usually solitary predators, this can lead to a lot of competition over prey. When competition occurs, it leads to a feeding frenzy. You probably heard that term used before, and you've probably heard it used many times to refer to Black Friday shoppers or kids at a party when the pizza finally arrives. How it typically goes is a few sharks will be attracted by the large electrical signals being put out by multiple prey in one location. Once they arrive, they'll fight over the prey. The commotion caused by the sharks fighting will add to the electrical signals, making them stronger and attracting even more sharks. Sometimes this can be relatively uneventful, but other times the sharks will start fighting each other, repeating the process, and pretty soon it turns into an all-out battle royale. Shark experts theorize that shark feeding frenzies are less about actually feeding and more about defending territory. They often engage in cannibalism as a show of dominance, with bigger sharks taking bites out of smaller ones to reinforce the pecking order. This doesn't seem to bother the small sharks as much as you think though, as sharks in frenzy mode are so fixated on claiming their share that there have been reports of frenzied sharks continuing to feed even while being mortally wounded by other sharks. Chillingly, some of the biggest shark feeding frenzies ever recorded happened at sites of shipwrecks. Because we're not used to swimming, our movements in water require more energy and produce a higher amount of electrical current. Combine that with our large body size relative to most fish, and stress of having to tread water while stranded at sea, and the fact that some people in a shipwreck may end up injured and bleeding, and you have the perfect storm to cause a truly epic shark frenzy. And while most sharks don't like the taste of human flesh at all, a frenzied shark will attack and eat anything, just so that other sharks won't be able to. You probably remember that scene in Jaws where Captain Quint describes the crew of the USS Indianapolis being picked off by sharks after the ship was torpedoed. Well, that was based on a true story, and it's not even the only one like it from naval history. Oceanic white-tipped sharks, one of the most common species found in open water, were known to make buffets out of many a sinking ship during the major naval battles of World War I and World War II. The steamship Nova Scotia sunk during the Second World War and had around 1,000 crew members when it went down. Only 192 survived to be rescued. By their accounts, many of the crew who survived but were injured in the initial disaster were devoured by frenzied oceanic whitetips. Not all sharks are so viciously territorial, however. The subgroup of sharks known as dogfish are so named because of the fact that they've been seen hunting cooperatively in dog-like packs. Whether they're pack hunters or working alone, gentle filter feeders or frenzied man-eaters, whether they're ambush predators or roving assassins, sharks are some of the most unique and fascinating animals on the planet. Their incredible senses make them unparalleled when it comes to tracking their prey, and because of this, they've filled a vital role in the ocean's ecosystem for hundreds of millions of years. No other predator is quite as good at what they do as the shark, but unfortunately many species of shark are on the decline. Overfishing plays a part in this decline, but another part is simply fear and misunderstanding. Sharks can die getting tangled in anti-shark nets, and often if a shark attack occurs in an area, this leads to all the local sharks being killed out of overcautiousness. So even though it's perfectly natural to be scared of these apex predators, keep in mind that they're just doing what they were made to do, and next time you go fishing or swimming or jet skiing, try to be mindful of the amazing creatures you're sharing the ocean with, because the blood being spilled there is more often theirs than ours.
Animals that can tell a Monet from a Picasso, animals that can deliver the finest drugs to your doorstep, or animals that can save up ammunition to shoot you down when you least expect it. They all exist, and today you'll see why. Number 10. Ants. Okay, so first of all, we should say that measuring intelligence is hard enough in humans, never mind in animals. There is no scale available that could tell us accurately just how smart a certain animal species is. Nonetheless, scientists have observed animals enough to know how good some are at problem solving, how they use tools, and how self-aware they are. So with that in mind, let's just look at animals that regularly pull off things that seem human-like in their cleverness. So let's first talk about ants. These little critters are sometimes called the world's smartest insect, although other folks might say, hold on there, what about bees? It's true, bees are also smart. But we love ants so much, we're going to talk about them. The average human might have in the region of 90 billion brain cells. Conversely, the ant might only have about 250,000, which isn't much, but in terms of brain mass, ants actually do have quite large brains. It's not the size, though, as the saying goes. It's what you do with it that matters, and ants do a lot of cool stuff. Just imagine being the size of an ant and trying to get around. Without the ant version of Google Maps, they seem to always know exactly where they're going, despite not really knowing the territory around them. That's because they use a bunch of navigational cues. For instance, they look at the panorama around them. They look at the position of the sun, how light is forming around them. They think about contours, smells, wind, what the ground feels like beneath them, and they even count their steps. So, they take in all that information and then they figure out the best way to get to a certain place. But what if you're a sadistic kid, and we know some of you have been one, and you just picked up an ant and took it to another place that it's never been, say 100 meters from its buddies? It's a long way for an ant. For sure, if it could speak, it would call you not a very nice name, but it could still probably get back home. Scientists in Australia did such an experiment, and they found out that the lost ant conducted what the scientists called a systematic search. The researchers wrote, the search pattern consisted of loops and was centered on the position where the nest was most likely to be located. At first, it covered a rather small area, but then it gradually extended outwards to cover a larger area. Ants are more than just good navigators, though. They're also quite good at discriminating who's healthy and who's sick. Researchers at the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria, and the University of Lausanne found that when some ants get sick, the colony gets down with a bit of social distancing. Basically, when the foragers go out and collect food, they risk picking up a disease, such as a fungal disease. The last thing a colony needs is everyone to get sick, so they somehow detect which ants have the disease and reduce their interactions with the other ants. But the really special thing about ants is how they work together, with scientists calling the whole group one big superorganism. They use pheromones to communicate via smell. So if during the day a predator is threatening the colony, ants can tell each other by passing messages down a very long line. And they might say something like, "Hey John, it's kicking off in the mound, let's go help." John might be a forager, not a fighter, but ants often change roles when needed. This teamwork makes them a force to be reckoned with. As one scientist said, an individual ant is not very bright, but ants in a colony, operating as a collective, do remarkable things. With communication including making noises and body movements, they can also solve pretty tricky problems. In one experiment, researchers took a bunch of ants out of their natural environment and put them in place where the researchers had also put a bunch of honey, twigs, pine needles, grains of soil, and also some non-natural things, such as bits of paper and sponge. The ants did a bit of communicating, and soon they started using the soil to soak up the honey so they could move it. They also started tearing off bits of sponge just big enough to carry, and they dipped them in the honey, ready for transportation. Some ants tested doing that with both the paper and the sponge to see which was the best, and they figured this all out pretty fast. And we're sure if the ants needed to take any of that stuff across a big drop, they'd have made a bridge out of it themselves. Next, we have an animal that might just be down for eating our super smart ants, but it's pretty clever itself. Number 9. Pigeons. If we asked 100 of our viewers what their favorite animal was, we doubt anyone would choose those poop-bombing pigeons who vandalize our balconies every day of the week. They might not be the smartest bird, we'll get to them soon, but pigeons are a lot more intelligent than you think. We can't talk about pigeon brains without mentioning war, especially the First and Second World Wars, when pigeons helped to save many, many lives. It wasn't the first time pigeons were used to carry messages during wartime. Even the great Julius Caesar used them to send home messages when he was fighting in Gaul. But in world wars, they were extremely important. The U.S. Army Signal Corps, for example, had 600 pigeons in World War I and World War II. The British forces had a whopping 250,000 pigeons. So, what's so special about them? The answer is, they can travel long distances as far as 1,000 miles and sometimes reach an average top speed of around 100 miles per hour. And they can come back to the spot where they left. Attach a little note to them and these guys are a handy device in war. In the world wars, they flew so high it was hard to shoot them down. And they got their messages where they were needed in quick time. As for how they do it, this is debated, but it's thought they have an internal compass, and with that they know where to go by looking at the position of the sun or looking at landmarks. the stars at night, or perhaps by feeling out the force of the Earth's magnetic field. The latter is called magnetoreception. As we said, this is still being debated. They might even use low-frequency signals to get where they're going. What's not up for debate is how good pigeons are at it, with them recently being used by gangs to deliver drugs to certain places, including inside prisons, where they might also occasionally deliver a small cell phone. Here's a newspaper headline from 2017. Police shoot carrier pigeon dead as it flies drugs into jail in a backpack. That was in Argentina, but we found similar stories from many other countries. Try asking a sparrow or an owl to do that and your heroin will end up in a tree someplace. But delivering war messages and the odd bit of prison spice isn't their only talent. One of the most famous pigeon studies involved two renowned painters, Pablo Picasso and Claude Monet. What's important to know is that these artists had very different styles. Monet was an impressionist, and we're sure you've all seen his paintings of water lilies. Picasso was known for the Cubist movement, with his often jagged paintings looking a bit scary, such as his famous Guernica. During the experiments, the pigeon had to peck a device, but they only got food when they pecked the device when a Picasso painting was shown to them. If they tried pecking when a Monet painting was shown, nothing came out of the device. They then learned which paintings paid out. In a short amount of time, they didn't even bother pecking when a Monet painting was above the device. But what's crazy is that they soon started pecking when they were shown Picasso paintings they'd never seen, and wouldn't peck when they were shown Monet paintings that they'd never seen. Later, the researchers used other Cubist and Impressionist artists, and the pigeons showed that they could differentiate between those two. Pigeons are very bright, as was proven in 2011 when some scientists at the University of Otago in Dunedin, New Zealand, showed through a series of tests that pigeons could count from 1 to 9. In 2016, a study using food rewards showed that pigeons were able to learn between 26 and 58 words with real meanings, and were able to pick them out among 7,832 words that were just meaningless jumbled letters. Turns out that pigeons have excellent memories, with The Guardian saying memory tests put pigeons high in the pecking order. The article talked about another study when one pigeon memorized 68% of 1,978 pictures, better than most humans could do. Another study concluded the pigeon is one of the smartest, most physically adept creatures in the animal kingdom. So be nice to pigeons, because it seems they don't easily forget a face. Maybe if you get pooped on, you were a target. Next up is man's best friend. Number 8. Dogs. Are dogs intelligent? Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but on other occasions our mutts surprise us with their intelligence, especially when food is around. As you all know, not all dogs and dog breeds are blessed with the same brains, as can be seen when a border collie straight up follows all kinds of orders and your beagle can't seem to get through one day without getting its head stuck in a boot. But any kind of canine is pretty clever when it comes to animal intelligence. After all, they can sense the sound of your voice when they're in trouble or about to get a treat. They might salivate at the lips when they hear the dinner bell strike, and when you're sad, they seem to know you need a bit of attention. Border collies are said to have the best brains when it comes to following orders, working things out, and generally getting things done. That's why they're employed as sheepdogs so often. It's because dogs have evolved for so many years alongside humans that they have an extra special ability to read us and read what's going on around us. Unlike most other animals, dogs can often sense when humans are in a bad mood, but they might also know if you have come across someone in the street and you don't like that person, or the person is a threat. They can read situations and levels of tension just because they're so familiar with humans. Try looking for sympathy from a pigeon, it won't work, in spite of their great intelligence. Dogs also have one of the best noses in the animal kingdom, which is handy when some other senses aren't that great. Dogs can be trained to find all sorts of things, including that China white heroin that pigeons brought into the prison. They can also smell criminals who've been at the crime scene. Dogs don't have the best sense of smell among animals, but they are definitely in the top 10, especially when we're talking about the bloodhound. These things, with their 230 million scent receptors, can track a scent that has passed through a place as long as 13 days ago, and they can follow a trail for something in the region of 150 miles. Talking about distance, you might have heard that you can take a dog many miles from its home and it can somehow get back. It's true because, like birds, they have a homing device, which is likely related to Earth's magnetic field. Maybe the most famous story about this involved Bobby the Wonder Dog, who was lost in 1924 while the owners were on vacation in the US. 6 months later, it was pawing at their house door after walking in the region of 2,800 miles. Dogs also demonstrate the ability to be cunning. As some scientists point out, they use deception to get what they want. Our pets can be sneaky and manipulative when they want to maximize the number of tasty treats they get to eat, said one writer. They do this kind of things to other dogs too, such as one dog will pretend that something's going on outside the house, and that leads the other dogs to go and have a look. Meanwhile, that sneaky pooch takes the best place on the sofa. It seems they also know when we are being deceitful. A study at the University of Vienna used 260 dogs of various breeds for some intelligence experiments. In them, someone who the dog didn't know, a kind of handler, would take the dog to look at two buckets. In one of the buckets was a treat, and in the other was nothing. The handler told the dog to go investigate the bucket with the food in it, just by pointing and using language cues. When the dog pawed some paper above the bucket, it found a treat. Now, a bond of trust had been formed. In the next part of the experiment, the handler went out of the room and someone took the food out of bucket A and put it into B. The dog watched this. When the handler came back in and told the dog to go to bucket A, it didn't. It went for B. The dog knew the handler was wrong. This might sound reasonable to you, but apes and children under the age of 5 are apt to follow whatever an adult tells them to do in such situations. And that's the thing with dogs, you actually don't have to be unreliable too many times for them to lose trust in you. If you do prove to be unreliable, that can lead to bad behavior in the household. One researcher said dogs have more sophisticated social intelligence than we thought. This social intelligence evolved selectively in their long life history with humans. And if that's not already impressive, you need to know that some dogs can learn a long list of words. Sure, you already know that your dogs respond to words like walkies or din-din or something silly like that, but some dogs know a lot of words. You could say any of 345 words to a border collie named Betsy, and she would run off and try to find that very thing. Number 7. Cats. We guess we have to talk about cats since we've done dogs. In the world of pet ownership, there's a kind of snobbery in which cat owners perceive dog owners as inferior, needy even, while they are far more independent, just as their pets are. They scoff at dogs for being stupid, and they always have to extol their cat's many talents, which in any decent world would be called dogism. But they're right in saying their cat is more intelligent than dogs, which, let's face it, is an assumption crudely based on things such as their cat doesn't attack the vacuum cleaner and won't jump through a window to get a hold of a fake sausage. That daft doggy on average has about twice the number of neurons in its brain than the feline counterpart, but that matters. Neurons are like processing units, so when you have more of them, you have more brain power. Dogs have around 500 million neurons, and cats around half that. As you already know though, it's not just about the size or the number of neurons, it's more complicated than that, as one scientist said. Small animals with absolutely small brains can be surprisingly smart, and large animals with absolutely large brains relatively unintelligent. For instance, an elephant is packing more neurons than a human, but we don't see any elephants sitting around on the savannah discussing their latest developments for self-replicating smart nanorobot weapons and talking about the cosmic futility they feel every morning when they wake up and go on ElliTube. It's how the brain is structured that matters, what it's made of, and that's complicated. Size can matter, but we can't just go on size alone. But back to cats. Some studies have shown that while they can be clever little animals, they can't keep up with canines when it comes to counting things and identifying quantities. Still, on the upside for cats, they have the ability to know something exists even when it's not there. Even when humans are really young, they don't have that ability, sometimes referred to as object permanence. Dogs have it too, by the way, but let's just focus on cats right now. On the downside for cats, an experiment in 2009 showed they had trouble with something rats or pigeons would probably find quite easy. That was, they had to pull on a string and a treat came out when they did it. But then they were faced with lots of strings, some which led to a treat and others that didn't. The poor felines were all over the place, they just grabbed at everything. Stupid cats. As for why cats don't always follow orders, that's not necessarily related to being clever or being dumb, they just haven't been as domesticated as long as dogs, which is probably why they like to go their own way. This could be a good thing when it comes to solving problems though. In studies with cats and dogs, both animals were asked to solve problems. Turned out that the dogs gave up faster and looked for help from humans, whereas cats were more prone to persevere and complete the problem by themselves. Overall though, we think dogs are just a bit more intelligent. Now let's talk about that big-brained beast we mentioned earlier. Number 6. Elephants. You already know that elephants have a pretty massive organ in their heads. It's smaller than the brain of a sperm whale and a little bit bigger than the animal we'll soon talk about, the dolphin. But the thing we want to discuss here is what kind of value do elephants get for their 5 kilograms of brain? They might not be able to develop weapons of mass destruction, but they have some traits that they show that are pretty bright. For one, they bury their dead in a ritualistic kind of way, and they even mourn by their grave. Not many animals do that. In fact, elephants might be the only ones besides primates and us humans. So, what does that tell you about elephants? It tells you they suffer from grief and have a certain amount of empathy. Elephants are said to have complex frontal lobes, and with that, they have emotional depth. They rejoice when meeting with an old friend, and they don't forget each other. When they come across a carcass of a past friend, they know who it was and it saddens them. As one researcher said, they stop and become quiet and tense in a different way from anything I've seen in other situations. Elephants aren't alone in being so emotional, but perhaps they stand out a bit among animals. they also have some wicked senses. According to a study undertaken by researchers at the University of Sussex in Brighton, they showed that elephants can hear a voice and detect the age and sex of the person, but in some cases also the ethnicity. That sounds weird, but it doesn't mean any ethnicity. The study involved researchers playing a recorded message to the elephants. The message was the same, but it was spoken by members of two different tribes, the Maasai and the Kamba of Kenya. Importantly, the Maasai has a long history of hunting elephants. So when an adult male from the Maasai tribe was heard talking, the elephants got scared and huddled together as if they were in danger. But when they heard the Kamba guy say the same thing, they just chilled. When children or women from the Maasai tribe read the message, the elephants also didn't give a damn because women and kids have never been a threat to them. Elephants have used tools too, such as sticks, with which to scratch themselves and blocks to stand on to get to high-hanging fruit. Some other elephants have been seen plugging up a water hole with something they made so the water couldn't evaporate. As you know, it's the use of the tools that makes us human as unpopular as we are today in the animal kingdom. Tool use is a good indicator of animal intelligence. Elephants can learn new stuff too, such as painting pretty pictures. Some people online have said this isn't true and there's some cheating going on. But when the BBC went to investigate, the elephant was really painting. In fact, they've been doing abstract paintings for years, and it is very much real, as you would know if you lived in parts of Thailand. It's not that the elephants are necessarily being creative, but that they've learned a bunch of strokes. They might even love painting. Every time an elephant named Ruby heard the word paint at the Phoenix Zoo, she would get really excited. Elephants have also been known to play musical instruments, and when they do, they show that they can almost make a melodic tune rather than lots of disjointed noise. One elephant band even finished its songs with crescendos. They are truly amazing animals, engaging in all kinds of play, showing self-awareness, having an outstanding memory, and at times being able to mimic the noise of other animals, including humans. One elephant in South Korea used a technique with its trunk to make the Korean words sit, no, yes, and lie down. As for problem solving, elephants are animal brainiacs. They can take their time solving a problem, and when one method doesn't work, they switch to another. They've been shown to work together when two elephants are required to pull a rope, and in another experiment, which involved lots of buckets and lots of apples being thrown into them, the elephants stood by and watched, and at the end of 74% of the time, they chose the fullest bucket. Let's now move on to an animal people love to eat, but don't like thinking about how it gets on their plate. Number 5. Pigs. Poor pigs. Man, they have a hard life. If you've ever seen what kind of conditions they live in before going to the slaughterhouse, and what happens at the slaughterhouse, well, something you can't unknow once you've seen it. We recommend you Google it for yourself and get informed. It's truly horrendous, cruel, and terrifying, and it's the lives of the most pigs in super-developed nations or in less developed nations. Free range is better than factory farm, but it's still a horrible life for the swine. When you see videos of pigs in factory farms or slaughterhouses, you can almost feel their pain, hear their pain in their screeching. Part of the reason why this is so hard is that pigs are very bright animals. It's as if they're aware of what's going on and what's going to happen to them. As if right before they're slaughtered, they totally know it. You can see it in their desperation when they try to get away. Anyone who's kept pigs know they are a very emotional animal. It's obvious they feel stress, joy, fear, confusion, and more. They have personalities too, with some of them being really friendly and some being a bit too stubborn. Well, that's when they're not wasting away in overcrowded farms. If left to live a natural life, they form social bonds with other pigs, and like some other animals we'll talk about later, they form hierarchies. That's to ensure there is some harmony in the group. Pigs must hate those farms so much given that they have to live in their own poop, because when left to their own devices, they are really tidy and they choose a spot where everyone goes to the toilet. They even decorate their living quarters, sometimes making them pretty with flowers. The saying "dirty as a pig" couldn't be more wrong. The only reason they like mud is to keep themselves cool and not get sunburned or keep bugs away, and they always make sure to use things such as bark to wipe the mud off later. Pigs communicate using a long list of grunts, and that's why when things are bad, all the pigs suffer a kind of emotional contagion. But they can use this communication for the good, showing in studies that they can work together to solve problems. When that's done, they sometimes bed down together nose to nose, looking just like human lovers wrapped up in bed sheets. According to one study, pigs were better at completing cognition tasks than a 3-year-old child, and way better than any traditional domestic pet. In another study, 4 pigs named Hamlet, Omelette, Ebony, and Ivory played a video game with their snouts, and they did pretty well. One researcher told the BBC, "They're not playing Minecraft, but they can manipulate a situation to get a reward. It's no surprise at all. When you look at a pig right in the eye, you can tell there's intelligence there." So pigs are skilled, they're compassionate, they're sensitive, and they're just cool. Let's hope one day their existences aren't animal hell on earth. Now for an animal you probably didn't expect to see on this list. Number 4. Crows. In 2019, the BBC asked a question. Crows could be the smartest animal other than primates? The article started with a story about some Oxford University students and a crow named Betty. Betty had a problem. In her cage, down a little tube was a bit of delicious pig heart. Sorry, pigs. But how could she get at it with just a beak and some claws? Betty thought for a while and suddenly noticed that inside her cage was a bit of wire, so she grabbed hold of the wire and pushed it against an object, so it was hooked at the end. She then went fishing for the heart and got it. Job well done. Crows might have tiny brains, but they are compact, having on average 1.5 billion neurons. It's those neurons that have made the crows the best at certain tests. They became the first animal outside of humans to complete a task to secure some food floating in water at the bottom of a tube. To get it out, they started picking up stones to displace the water and bring the food to the top. Most kids can't do this until they're about 7 years old. Crows use tools in the wild all the time. They mourn their dead, and they also are self-aware, being able, according to a 2020 study, to contemplate what's in their heads. In short, scientists measured their brain stimulus when they're asked to complete a task. It was shown that the birds didn't just complete the task, but they were aware that they had done it. This relates to what we call consciousness. Crows don't forget people either. In another experiment, humans wearing masks tagged some crows and let them fly off. Later, people wearing the same masks walked around and the crows dive-bombed them, presumably because they didn't much like being tagged. Each crow chose the correct mask to dive-bomb rather than just any of the humans. Crows might even be able to differentiate between human languages. One study involved crows that were used to Japanese people talking. The researchers played the crows' Japanese voices on a recording. They didn't seem interested at all, perhaps because they'd heard something similar before. But when the recording featured Dutch voices, the crows became animated and seemed enraptured by the voices. Crows are also sly. Many animals plan for the future, as you can see when intelligent animals such as foxes, rats, and squirrels hide their food. But crows take things a step further. Sometimes they're about to hide something and then they notice another crow is watching, and still they carry on pretending to hide the food. They've actually hidden it in their feathers with the plan to hide it when the other crow is busy looking for food that's not there. If that isn't cool, crows also use humans to help them eat. Let's just say they have a nut, but they can't crack it. No problem, they just drop it in the street, where they know a car will run over it. They've even been known to wait for the crosswalk sign to go green before they safely stroll across the street to eat the cracked nut. Alright, now on to another of your favorite animals. Number 3. Rats. We should know damn well rats are clever, because we certainly use enough of them for our experiments, from trapping them in mazes to getting them hooked on drugs. Rats are said to be some of the brightest animals on the planet, but again, they have a very small brain. A researcher was asked this, and she responded, "Even though the rat brain is smaller and less complex than the human brain, research has shown that the two are remarkably similar in structure and function. Both consist of a vast amount of highly connected neurons that are constantly talking to each other." There's the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but it seems with rats you can always teach them new tricks. They're one of the best animals at performing tasks humans have asked them to do, but there usually has to be something in it for them. If you give them a stroke after that, they emit a noise that we humans can't hear. But we now know that it's rat laughter. If that doesn't enamor you, studies have also shown rats sacrifice for the greater good. In those studies, some rats chose to free other rats from cages rather than go for a food reward and leave the other rats behind bars. They're definitely smart animals, but in one study in Belgium, they performed even better than humans. The rats and humans were taught to look at certain good and bad patterns, and they were given new patterns to look at and were asked to say if they were good or bad. They weren't asked as in talking, of course, but directed to choose in another way. The study leader, Ben Vermeerke, said the rats outperformed the humans at one stage in the study when things got more complex. The rats just had a better way of working things out. As one scientist said, although rats may not approach cognitive tasks using strategies observed in human subjects, they are frequently successful on their own terms. He said rats find loopholes to complete a task that humans don't tend to think about. Alright, it's time we talked about something that lives in the sea. Number 2. Dolphins. Sure, we could have gone for the big-brained whale, and we might have chosen the incredibly smart octopus, but in the end we went for dolphins. Female dolphins only give birth a few times in their lives, but when they do, they spend a lot of time teaching their young. These youngsters grow up in a complex environment with many rules. To deal with that, they need a complex brain, and dolphins have one, including a large neocortex, the part of the brain associated with intelligence. Dolphins, like elephants, engage in complex play, such as making bubbles in the water and biting them for fun. They might even help other species when they're in trouble, which they've done with humans a few times when humans are looking like they're in trouble. Not many animals do that, which shows empathy as well as intelligence. Dolphins are also one of the few animals to pass something called the mirror test, which could mean they are self-aware. Basically, the test entails putting a mark on an animal when it's unconscious or at least not aware of what's going on. It then gets a mirror shoved in front of it, and if it notices the mark, often a red blotch, it has seen the change and so is self-aware. As for problem solving, in one experiment, a dolphin named Kelly was given some fish treats every time she brought a piece of waste paper to a human. She wanted more fish, so of course she soon learned to get one piece, hide it under a rock, rip it up, and take the human's much smaller pieces each time. That meant more fish. Dolphins are also really good at passing on such knowledge using various sounds. They're excellent teachers, as is seen when adults teach the young that if they go foraging with a bit of sponge on their snouts, they'll get hurt less when hitting various sharp objects. And if dolphins look like emotional creatures, it's because they are. For their size, they have really big brains, and a part of that brain is something called the paralimbic system. Scientists say this is why dolphins can live in large groups and have complex relationships with all the members. The ability to work together in groups is what makes humans so powerful, but for most animals it's just not possible. Animals have to form hierarchies and social systems to be successful, otherwise you can have total chaos. It's this collaboration that humans have that's the reason you're watching this video right now. It took a lot of work to get from the days when we were grunting at each other in caves to now, which brings us to the number 1 spot on this list. Number 1. Primates. Which primates do we choose, since there are over 500 species? From ones only as big as your fist to ones that look like King Kong. Some of them live in trees in small groups, and some live mostly down on the ground in groups of around 15 to 150. It's the apes, not the monkeys, that are the most intelligent primates. That's namely orangutans and chimpanzees, which actually have very different habits and lifestyles while also being very similar. Chimps live in groups, and they have a strict social order revolving around the dominance hierarchy we just talked about. Without this order, they wouldn't be successful at survival. But it does sometimes seem brutal. For what looks like no good reason, they beat up and rip apart a member of their own group. It doesn't seem like an intelligent thing to do, given that the chimp you've just killed could have your back one day. It also doesn't look great to some of the other chimps who might fear and distrust the instigator of the beatdown. Remember that a good alpha male isn't just tough, it's also fair and needs respect just as much as fear from the group. It's not always clear why chimps kill their own, but at the end of the day it has to be something to do with a problem in the hierarchy. Some chimps still need kicking out, and that usually means a lot of blood being spilled. Still, they also show great kindness and they mourn for their dead. With primates, much time is spent grooming each other, which shows you are a solid member of the group. So the love they show is as important as any violence. If there was a chimp social media platform, everyone would write, "relationship complicated." But that just shows how clever they are. They forage in groups and they fight in groups, sometimes showing battle strategies other animals would not be able to come up with. If chimps have been on a hunt and tore apart some poor monkey, they're usually sharing the food with the others who haven't been part of the hunt. How they share also shows their cunning and kindness. It's all part of a larger scheme in the game of life. They are complex when it comes to leadership too. Some chimps rule with an iron fist and others are fairer and do a lot more grooming. In some cases, the ones who've been harsh get overthrown, so it pays to show some tough love and not just rule with the threat of violence. They use grunts and screams and other noises to communicate, and they use all kinds of body language to put across how they feel. They fish for termites and ants using sticks and stalks, and after looking at how the older chimps do it, they can learn how to use a rock as an anvil and smash a nut on another rock or tree branch. It's pretty ingenious for an animal, but all sorts of tools are used by chimps. They use weapons too. At Furuvik Zoo in Sweden, one chimp didn't much like the crowds upsetting his peace, so he started throwing rocks at people. The zookeepers had no idea where the chimp had gotten so many rocks, so they filmed him during the night. Turned out he collected rocks and made secret ammunition piles, which he'd use when he knew visitors were coming back. It's not that unusual for chimps to throw things at people, it's just part of them wanting to look dominant. But what's amazing here is how this chimp planned his attacks the night before or days before. They've also been known to construct makeshift ladders to get out of their enclosures, building them first and taking them down at night. We could add more, but you get the picture. These animals are the closest we have to ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly. As for orangutans, they aren't quite as unpredictable as chimps, so there's little chance one would pull off your face for no obvious reason. Orangutans are fairly timid most of the time, but that's mostly because they don't live in hierarchies like chimps. Orangutans are also quite solitary, and the males don't bring up the young, although they will hang out together from time to time, and if push comes to shove, the alpha would turn up and sort out a problem. It's debatable if orangutans are more intelligent than chimps, although we know who we'd prefer to spend a quiet afternoon with. They spend a lot of time chilling, and when they go out foraging, they don't often eat meat. They might use any number of really complex tools. In some instances, they've been seen to have not just tools, but often have tool kits, with each tool used for specific tasks. In captivity, they've used things such as hammers and saws, although they won't be getting hired to fix your deck anytime soon. They can match chimps in many ways, but they are the first animal in the world to show they can manage gift exchanges using something called calculated reciprocity. That's because you're thinking, well, he gave me a crap gift for Christmas, so he's getting something equally rubbish back. Orangutans have their gift exchanges weighed up. What's more, They might be the first animal to talk about the past. We know this because scientists observed orangutan mothers when danger was passing by. She didn't move or make a noise, but when the danger had passed, she went over to her kids and in orangutan speech said something like, "Watch out, kiddo, that damn clouded leopard's back again." We should say that to conduct this experiment, the researchers dressed up as predators. All kinds of primates use a special kind of hoot when danger is lurking, but what hadn't been seen before is animals waiting several minutes and then sounding the alarm. That shows a good deal of consciousness rather than a natural instinctive reflex. So we can't say which is the smartest ape because they're all good at different things, and what they're good at relates to how they live their life. But we do like this bit of information passed on by a zookeeper. Give a gorilla a screwdriver and he will sniff it, taste it, and then discard it. Give the screwdriver to a chimp and he will sniff it, taste it, and then discard it. Give the screwdriver to an orangutan and he will examine it, hide it, and at night use it to disassemble his cage. Well, a chimp might use it to stab your eyes out, which we guess is also very human. That's it for today. Now you need to watch What If Animals Went to World War with Humans, or have a look at why you wouldn't survive a town full of ants.